What is going on, Rotogrinders? Dean here. It's Dean 7904 if you want to get all technical. I mean, it's 10:10 on the East Coast, 7:10 on the West Coast, 9:10 Tennessee time, which, hey, Tennessee, you got some sports gambling now. It just broke down today. If you guys are in Tennessee and you have an itching for, if you don't want to, you want to branch out from DFS, you want to sports gamble a little bit, hey, it's a fair game. Have at it. Good times at that. Hey, I don't know why I'm talking about sports gambling. Of course, DFS and sports gambling, it melds in the same world. Do want to say hello to YouTube. What up, YouTube? I have you guys pulled up. We're going to do our best to interact throughout this show. If you guys have anything interesting to say, try to stay on topic. If we're talking quarterbacks, hey, mention a quarterback. We'll probably bring it up organically. If we don't, we'll get to it. It's an intimate show. It's just a two-man booth. It's myself and the maker of beer, from such things as the OG podcast you guys listen to throughout the week, yourself, Chop, and Notorious, of course. And, hey, the six-pack. What up, beer? How are things in your world?
What's up, buddy? We've gone 2 minutes. We haven't brought up the word wind. Win. That's all I'm hearing now.
Is weather a thing? Is that a thing today?
Yeah, I mean, I went outside, let the dog out earlier. I'm up in the Midwest, and it's about 40 degrees, about 35-mile-an-hour winds, sleet, potential snow. So I mean, I didn't throw a football around, but I could see where this could be an issue. So I know that's a question a lot of people have. We're joking about it, but weather is certainly starting to impact us. We're in week 8 now. It's going to become a bigger factor. So do we overreact? Do we underreact? Big part of today is going to be the weather. So we're definitely going to talk about it. But Dean, to answer your question, I am good. It's another football Sunday, ready to rock here and talk some games here.
I don't know what the appropriate amount is to react, but I think I'm reacting to some degree. I'm not freaking out. I let Vegas dictate me, as far as we've seen a lot of the totals tumble a bit. And of course, Chief Meteorologist Kevin Roth, who, by the way, get comfortable, sit down, chill out. You guys are going to be here for the next 2 hours and I guess 47 minutes if you want to get all technical. Chief Meteorologist Kevin Roth, I just dropped his link in chat for the people as far as what's going on. He did update those games, and he has the color coding. I'm not going to go ahead and read through all of them, but we have 3 reds still in Green Bay, in Cleveland, in Buffalo. It looks like it's a little bit better in Chicago. That's currently a yellow. Again, the link is in chat for you guys. Go ahead and check that out in YouTube chat. Like, subscribe. You know how that works. Notifications, turn that bell on as well. But Roth will be here at 12:30. We're just, we're just the appetizer here, because people are going to want to hear what Roth has to say with both most up-to-date update. He'll tell people what's going on weather-wise then. And you said you're talking about stepping outside. Maybe the people don't know. You got boots on the ground. How close are you to Lambeau in Green Bay?
I'm actually in Michigan, so I'm a ways from Lambeau, Dean. So
that did not help at all.
No, I mean, born and raised there, no doubt, but I can't give you the boots on the ground. So I'm about 12 hours from Lambeau. But Midwest is Midwest. The weather is definitely rough here in Detroit. The game's in a dome, so I know that's something that we'll hit on one of the games. We don't have to worry about the weather, but it's going to be rough in a lot of these spots. I think it's going to be overblown in a lot of spots. So we'll mix it in, but there's a lot of other things to talk about than the weather.
Yeah, so we talked about, Ross going to be on later with Tuttle and with Christie. They come on at 12:30. The next show, they talk a lot more tournament stuff. They talk a lot more, delving into ownership and how to pivot and different strategies and how to be different. That's going to be Tambo and that's going to be Britt. And I'm sure that they'll follow up on that. Of course, we're going to touch on it as well, too, as far as the weather and what to do there and how much people are freaking out. So, just kind of stay tuned, stick around. They're going to be showing off the Lineup HQ tool. If you guys don't have the Lineup HQ at your own leisure, guess what, beer? They can get $5 off. The link's going to drop in chat momentarily. Get $5 off your first month of Core 4. Check out that link. You get your NFL fix. You get to play with the Lineup HQ tool. You want to build 150 lineups in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes. You want to kind of put your own rules in, things of that sort. Have at it. Not just that, you get our expert rankings and you get all the articles and all the extra bonus videos and yada, yada. Have fun here at RG. Do want to mention we have a monkey knife fight promo. I was looking at this earlier today as far as picking a couple overs and under. We have a deal with them. You get 3 months off. 3 months for free, actually, if RG Premium, if you sign up through the RG the RG link. Not just that, you get 100% deposit bonus up to $50. Use yourself the promo code Grinders. Beard, tell me if you think I'm right. Tell me if you think I'm wrong. I went a little chalky here as far as my picks. All right, so I took Jamal Williams, 16.5 fantasy points. You like the over or you like the under?
I like the over. Packer. I like, I'm going to leave my homerism out of this, but I do like the over. We saw him be very effective last week. Expect him to carry the work again this week. I know A.J. Dillon probably going to work in a little bit more. That is one of those weather spots, so I expect Green Bay not only to run the ball, but the short passing game, and he can thrive in that setting. So you're getting those points as well. I think that's a pretty easy over there.
I got the over on Jamal Williams. Again, that's kind of sort of somewhat shocking. That number is not too – I think he gets over that more than 50% of the time. Basically, that's the bottom line, over 16.5 fantasy points. And Derrick Henry, they couldn't set this number high enough for me. I'm giving it away. I'm taking the over. Obviously, y'all probably see it on the screen. 21.5 points. I think there's he gets 200 total yards today. I think that's sort of in play. I don't know if that's likely. You don't need that, obviously. I just think he just ravages today. I love the King. What do they call him? The big man. Why am I forgetting King Henry's nickname? Big Derek. Big something. The Beast. I don't know.
King Henry. That's what I thought.
It's something else. There's another one in the chat's going to tell us, and we're going to feel stupid. But yeah, I like Derrick Henry.
Dog. The big
there
dog.
You go. That's what it is. The big dog. Yeah. Why couldn't I think of that? Yeah. You like Derrick Henry today?
It's early. I love that whole team, and I know that's one of the weather spots, but I love Henry, of course. Great matchup. I do like Tannehill as well. This Cincinnati defense just been ravaged. I mean, when Baker Mayfield throws 5 touchdowns on you, you got some problems. So I think you can go Henry. I think if you wanted to get away from Henry, you could go with a Tannehill A.J. Brown stack, which is what I like this week. But both are certainly viable. That's pretty easy over there as well.
Yeah, now the chat is telling us big dog, and I feel like a complete dope.
Hey, I got it first. So chat, just a tick behind. We got you lined up, Dean. Don't worry.
They're on delay. They don't realize that, I suppose, but they definitely buzzed in quicker than I knew it. Do also want to mention Roth did. We have the article we dropped in the chat. He also is tweeting out too, and just for what it's worth, and these things will possibly adjust later on the next couple hours. But weather-wise, again, don't want to obsess over the weather. Want to acknowledge it, give it a head nod. The problem spots, he has them ranked based upon the most problematic, the least problematic. Most problematic for what it's worth, he has Cleveland, then a gap, then Buffalo and Green Bay, then a gap, then Cincinnati, then a gap, and that's Chicago, Giants, Baltimore, and Philly. So if you guys want to see that in chat, there you go. Have it at your own leisure. But yeah, we're going to probably mention it sporadically throughout the show, but I don't want to talk weather the entire time. I'm sure you don't want to either. And I'm sure the chat has heard people talk about weather as well, just way too much. But, it's a thing today, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a factor, but I think people sometimes overblow it. Sometimes people undershoot how important it is. And wind's one of those, I think, is more important than snow and some of these other weather things that we get. Just think about trying to throw a football down the field, some of the other aspects of the game. So it's certainly something we have to factor into everything we're talking about today.
Yeah, and it's rough because last week we had 5 or 6 dome games. Today we have 1 dome game, and it's weird, and we love the dome games, but nobody's really talking about the 1 dome game for good reason. We're all kind of sort of fed up with Indianapolis and Detroit, I think, for the most part, trying to make those teams happen. There's a few pieces here and there to do some things, but give me your general view, your general perspective as far as a slate before we kind of dive in and break it down position by position.
I mean, I think it's a fun slate. I've heard it's gross, it's this, it's that. I mean, I think it's a lot of ways you can go. Sometimes the lineups kind of build themselves, and those weeks turn into chalky weeks. Like last week, we saw a lot of the chalk hit. That's no fun for tournament players, even cash game players. Everybody kind of on the same stuff, and you have to differentiate in 1 or 2 spots. This week, I think there's a lot of ways you can go. You could attack some of those weather games where we've seen ownership really fall. A guy like Derek Carr initially was the highest owned quarterback, and now he's fallen down the ranks a little bit. But do you want to take that risk? Those are the questions you have to ask yourself. So all in all, I think this is a great slate. You add more pieces to the puzzle, it becomes a lot more fun, in my opinion.
Speak for yourself. Last week, for a chalk donkey like myself, last week was very good. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was good for my bankroll. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Let's keep the momentum going. You're only as good as your last slate. So who cares what happened last slate? The DFS, brand new day. We start all over again. And how good, honestly, could a slate be when the highest projected owned quarterback is Jimmy Garoppolo? Who's excited to play Jimmy Garoppolo? But matchups matter. And, Seattle has been the most horrific team defensively against the pass, just more so than any other team by a wide margin. Even the 31st worst team is not even close to how bad Seattle has been. And some of it is due to like context of the games, and they've shot out a bit. And of course, there was an overtime game as well too, which I guess can see the numbers just a pinch. But Garoppolo, he just fits the bill as far as cash game quarterback today, and that's that, right?
I mean, this is like a 3-4 pronged reason why Jimmy Garoppolo is the chalk here. First of all, the price. I mean, he's cheap. You're getting a nice discount off of, say, a Russell Wilson. You're saving $2,400. That can be useful in other spots too. It's easy to pair him up. I mean, you use Kittle. They're down to Brandon Ayuk and basically Kendrick Bourne as pass catchers, so you can combo those guys. 3, we know Seattle's defense, like you mentioned, absolutely terrible. Every game seems to be a shootout. We know Seattle's going to score points. That's going to force the hand of San Francisco. We know they want to run the ball. They're getting Tevin Coleman back today, but are they going to be able to establish the run and continue that through 4 quarters against Russell Wilson? Highly doubtful. So that's what's all leading to Jimmy Garoppolo being the highest owned. I don't mind him in cash games. I'll have a little bit in tournaments because you have to have that game. I think that's another reason people are kind of congregating here is it's not a weather concern. It feels safe. It feels cozy to get here. The problem in tournaments, does he have enough upside? He doesn't run much at all. So can he get there? Can he get me to the 30 points that a Russell Wilson can bring? And maybe he doesn't need to get there. You're saving the money if you spend that wisely elsewhere. So I'm more intrigued in cash games, in tournaments. I just think there's more upside elsewhere. You have to spend a little bit more, obviously, but to me, is cash game viable. Tournaments, again, I'll have some, not going to go crazy with it.
Proud of UCF. Shaq Griffin also expects the miss too for Seattle for what it's worth, making that bad defense even worse. I feel okay with him in cash games, and you got to think that Shanahan is sharp enough, is smart enough to realize that you should just pass the ball against Seattle. I hope that's the thought process. Now, we did see that game a couple weeks ago where Garoppolo was benched at the half. He was just an absolute disaster, but I don't anticipate that to happen. We have Eric Lynn in chat saying I'm so out on Jimmy G in cash, like 4 O's. Okay. I mean, look, we live in the world with salary cap. There you go. Check that off your bingo. But who else are you going to pay for? I love Russ, but I don't know if he fits the bill. I'm kind of tinkering around, and I want to load up on some of these running backs that are kind of expensive. I want to get a premium tight end. You already hinted at his name. Like, everybody wants Kittle today, obviously. If we're not playing Garoppolo in cash, or just tell me who your tournament guys. Of course, Russ has got to be in the conversation.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, you want to attack that game. If you missed out on that game last week, you know how that ended for you. It didn't go so well. So both sides of that, obviously. And I think there's enough value at the other spots where you can pretty much go anywhere. Now, Mahomes is interesting. You have the debate. We know they're going to score points. How much are they going to have to play in this game? How much resistance can the Jets put up to keep Mahomes viable here? Or do they just pound the ball on the ground, which we're going to talk about, a spot I really like there. But Russ, certainly. Mahomes is intriguing. Lamar Jackson, a guy no one's really talking about here, but it's another 50-point total. Pittsburgh's defense been outstanding, but we know he's got a massive ceiling. We haven't seen the 2019 ceiling yet, but that's coming. But I think the other option is probably Joe Burrow. We talk Titans. We like Derrick Henry. We like the Titans side of things. I think the Bengals have shown they can do enough, and this Titans defense has been somewhat lackluster. You worry about the offensive line for the Bengals, obviously, but all 3 of the weapons in the passing game have been phenomenal. Gio Bernard, another week, a guy that can catch the ball out of the backfield. So I think if you're not going Garoppolo and you want to save a little bit, I think Joe Burrow is probably your best bet. Gives you some upside with his running abilities, giving you a nice floor. We've seen the ceiling, so you kind of get that combination of the two. So if you're not a Jimmy G guy, I think Burrow, if you're saving money, is your guy. If not, I think you just go Russ and you figure the rest out.
We got Brian in chat saying Burrow. We got Ethan in chat saying Burrow and cash. Well, let me ask you this, Beer. How many Cincinnati Bengals offensive linemen have to be out for you to be concerned? Because we're at 3.
Say it's clearly more than 3. So, I mean, and that is a concern, no doubt. Tennessee's defense is viable this week, but I think Burrow can do enough. Yes, it's a concern, but again, he's shown the floor. He's shown the upside. Maybe this causes him to run more. If they're going to be all in on him and these offensive linemen coming off the bench are not very good, maybe that gives us more upside with Burrow's legs. So, yes, concerning, but I still think at that price, if he's, near Russ, if he's 7,200, probably not as interested, but he's close enough to Garoppolo. And I just think there's way more upside there.
Yeah, it's one of those weird circumstances where I think the Tennessee defense is interesting, and Burrow's been sacked plenty, and that line is vulnerable. But I also think Burrow's good, and I think he has good receivers. And like you said, he's got legs where, in theory, he can scramble out of problems, which almost definitely are going to come up. Just kind of make something happen out of nothing. And then, we had this dilemma last week with Josh Allen against the Jets, and it's like, well, maybe the matchup is too good. Like, you're just going to absolutely ravage them, and they're going to do nothing in the second half. And that game did not turn out anywhere where we expected. I think I could be. I don't think they punted the entire game. Buffalo.
It seemed like it. I mean,
they had six field goals and some turnovers. What a weird game that was. The offense did nothing. And it's the Kansas City Chiefs now, 34 team total, good weather relative to everybody else. Maybe the matchup's too good and they're going to be up 28-0 at the half. And how do they get to 28? How did that happen? That's right. Important, right?
That's the part people forget sometimes is if he goes into the half of 4 touchdowns, like you're feeling damn good about it. So that's the interesting spot. I think you want to make a decision on that one. I'm certainly going to go that route again. We have enough value where you could stack these guys up and still feel all right about
it. Anything else that's kind of sort of somewhat interesting for, your boy Rodgers, they're charging you full price. The weather is kind of goofy, especially the first half. That's why it's projected. I like Lamar in tournaments. I know he hasn't been the same guy he was last year. I know the Pittsburgh Steelers are a defense I want to avoid, but you're also getting a discount. He's the cheapest he's been all year long. He's like, the 4th or 5th most expensive guy in DK. The price is pretty reasonable on FanDuel, and always he could break off a 50-yard touchdown on the ground, and that's 11 points right there. You're already basically kind of sort of almost halfway there. I love him for tournaments. I actually have him in some of my 1 p.m. only contests today as well, where I can't get access to Wilson and to Garoppolo as well. Other quarterbacks that are kind of worth a look. Herbert has been fantastic,
right?
Just phenomenal. You got some great options there as well too to pair him with. Allen's gonna be chalky. We'll talk about him soon enough. What a weird week that was last week. He got 4 touchdowns and none of them to anybody you've ever heard of. I don't think, for the Chargers. The dude from the XFL. A weird stacking week if you had Herbert last week. Other quarterbacks that are worth a mention, or shall we move on to running backs?
I think we have to discuss this Detroit Indy game. I mean, I'm not a Phillip Rivers guy at all, but it is a good matchup. It is in a dome. It's the question to me is who the hell do you pair him with and feel good about it? I mean, T.Y. Hilton's been a mess. Johnson comes out of nowhere. Burton's been good, but now Mo Alley Cox is expected back. How does that work? Now they have 3 tight ends. So what are you doing, Rivers? I'm having a hard time. I want to get some access to that game because I do think it could shoot out a little bit, but the problem is the pairing, and I'm just not a Rivers guy. So where are you at there?
I'm not playing him. So I am playing an uncomfortable amount of T.Y. Hilton right now, which I know he's in the wrong side of 30. He's looked toast. The grandma narrative didn't work out. When grandma calls you out and he still doesn't show up, that's kind of a problem. But look, he's had a week and a half off. He's as rested as he's going to be, right? They're coming off a bye. And look, one of my mottos, one of my things I think of in DFS is like, look, you have to be willing to fade the person at the wrong price and play him at the right price. I think it's baked in, like 4-9 on DK, 5-5 on FanDuel. I think all this, and like you said, like historically we love him in domes. I'm gonna have some T.Y. Hilton, begrudgingly, like it's gonna happen, but I'm not playing Rivers. I don't need it.
I landed on some TY and I felt the same. Like that's definitely not a comfortable button to push. So the price is right though. The matchup's decent. I know Jonathan Taylor are going to be pretty popular today, so it kind of gets you away from some of that, gets you access to the passing game. So intrigued with that game. I don't know how much I'll have, but I hear some people talking about it. I'm trying to get there, but Phillip Rivers I just can't do it. So Wilson, we love, obviously. Burrow, Tannehill, I talked about earlier. Big fan there as well. You brought up Herbert. I think that's a solid one. So plenty of options. If you're not a Jimmy G guy and you don't want to play him in cash, a lot of ways you can go here this week. As always, quarterback's always loaded with options.
Do want to mention, I just jumped over to the FanDuel lobby. I was curious about the Rotogrinders single entry series. These are the first contests I sign up for on RG every single week. Not on RG, on FanDuel every single week, but Rotogrinders does sponsor them. It's just added value. They take your top 4 scores, top 4 or top 6. Don't quote me on that. Devin's going to go ahead and drop a link there in chat for you guys, explain everything. Doesn't cost you anything more, just added value. The top 4 or top 6 scores for like the top 2 people at each price tiering. There's the 25. It's a $33 entry fee, $100 entry fee, and it's a 5 because I'm pulling off right now, and they're all still, none of them are full for whatever reason. But I love single entry contests. I like a flat payout. This is both. My favorite contest on FanDuel, and I'm not just saying that because it's RG sponsored. I promise you, I love these contests. I think actually Shrek, if he's lurking, and that's what a username, not the big green ogre guy.
I was waiting for the actual Shrek to come in. Like, now we're talking. I know we just had Halloween, so a little Shrek appearance would be nice here.
I think he took it down. I feel like I noticed that somewhere.
Awesome.
Maybe it was a different contest. Yeah. Well, yeah. Basically, it's just added value. There's a contest at the end of the season, like for $20,000 up for grabs. Go ahead, Devin. Feel free to drop that link in chat. They're also saying Mark Ingram is out. That's news that just broke apparently on the Twitter machine. There was some speculation. That's a good segue, I suppose, to running backs. Although I don't know what to do with Mark Ingram being out. Baltimore just seems to. They're probably going to have more running backs, and Lamar is probably their best running back today. I know some people talk about Dobbins, and some people talk about the idea of, well, you're going to unleash your rookie after a bye week. We saw the same thing happen with Swift. Different organizations do different things. I guess I suppose he's kind of sort of somewhat interesting, but that's not where we're starting as far as running backs. It's pretty clear, the top tier, the cash game running backs this week. Jamal Williams, they priced him up, but not high enough, right? He's still way too well. He's just going to get 20 touches or so. If we expect that game's going to grind out, you can't pass, a little bit trickier there. Maybe 25 touches. The discrepancy versus Dillon was dramatic last week. Now it might get knocked down to 75%, possibly. Even that is still enough. Williams, Hunt, Kamara, Bernard, Henry. That's your cash game running backs. I guess maybe Gaskin you can kind of sort of somewhat justify. I've seen Montgomery pop up in some places, but I'm not doing that. What are your thoughts as far as the top running back tier, as far as a cash game perspective? Where are you at?
I think the highest owned guys are the way to go in cash games. I think it's a big four. It's Williams, it's Kamara, it's Hunt, it's Henry. Whether you're taking 2 or 3 out of that group, I think that's the way to go. Now in tournaments, we're talking 30-35% ownership on these guys. So you don't have to take a stand, but I think this is a good segue in where we're going to land on these guys. So let's play. Do we want to play some of these guys in tournaments? So if you had to dump one, Dean, you dump one of these 4 out of your player pool. You want to play 3 running backs. You got these big 4. Who gets the X? Who's not on the Family Feud board, as you love to say?
It's weird, man, because one of the bigger dilemmas that I had, and like I'm known for, not known for, whatever. Like this is amongst people that know me, I'm known for, and they goof on me for chopping my cash game sometimes. And right now I'm splitting Kamara and Henry.
Okay.
It's a tricky thing because I really think Henry just absolutely ravages the Bengals. But Kamara, without Sanders, without Thomas, once again, the Bears have a pretty good defense. Right. There was some weather issues that I thought would kind of subdue him to some degree, and they might throw 8 guys in the box at him. Of course, New Orleans will be creative in terms of just dumping the ball off to him, and the ADOT can be negative -1 yards today, and he can get 7 or 8 balls. Probably a better play on DK for that reason, just because of that PPR. But Bernard I like, but I don't think Bernard's able to run the ball today. So but of course he's cheap, and that's kind of built in. So he's still cash game playable. On DK, I don't have Bernard right now. On FanDuel, I do. He's in my FanDuel mix. So it depends where you're shopping. Williams at 7K on FanDuel is just a steal. Hunt priced up to 8.2K, but still really, really solid there against Vegas. Vegas not a solid defense, and we saw Hunt just get the lion's share, got basically everything. And again, it's another game that might be subdued by weather to some degree. Maybe he'll catch a bunch of short passes as well, too. We know he's a history of being a good pass catcher out of the backfield. They might get creative there. Did I answer your question? Because I think it depends where you're shopping. Kamara, it's weird. Like Kamara and Bernard are my 2 least favorite. It doesn't mean I don't like them, but hey, you got to make decisions. You can't play everybody.
I'm in the same boat. Kamara's the guy for me. And it never feels good to go in a slate knowing Michael Thomas is out, knowing he's going to receive a ton of work in the passing game, and leaving him off of your rosters. But again, we can't fit everybody. So if I'm looking at these big 4, he's the guy I take out. The matchup, not great. We know he's going to get targets. We know those are valuable, and I agree. More so on DraftKings, you still have some competition in that backfield with Latavius Murray, who could get some goal line touches. You got Taysom Hill, who could come in and steal goal line touches. So we don't know for certain that Alvin Kamara is going to get those touchdowns. Can he rack up enough receptions against the Bears defense, who has been very good against running backs, is very good against pass catching running backs? We're talking about a top 10 DVOA run D. Well, I look at the other matchups. Derrick Henry against Cincinnati,
Oh,
bottom 10 run D. Jamal Williams against Minnesota, terrible run D. Kareem Hunt against Vegas, awful run D. So the matchups are just so much better for those guys. So that's kind of the deciding factor. Plus, you're paying more for Kamara this week. So again, it's not great. I don't hate Kamara. I just don't see myself going crazy when there's better plays in that price range, guys that can save you a little bit of money and similar ownership. Those are the three for me.
I don't know if you're playing Yahoo this week or not. Yahoo includes the night game. Boston Scott's like $17 or $18, and Gio's like 17 or 18. Do you have a preference? I'm not sure how much you thought you put into the night game or not, but Boston Scott versus the Cowboys or Gio Bernard?
A Boston Scott for me. I still have concerns about Gio. I think that, if we expect Derrick Henry and this Titans offense to do what they do, it's going to lean more towards Burrow in the passing game. And Gio, yes, he could be involved in that. He could certainly catch a receiving touchdown, but how much work is he going to get on the ground? Where Boston Scott, he's going to do it all in a much better matchup. They should control that game. Dallas has been that bad. So Scott for me.
Yeah, they're talking about Latavius Murray as a touchdown vulture in chat. I suppose. I mean, I think there's a big opportunity cost to running back, and there's a lot of running backs that are probably more interesting, that have more upside, that are also not going to be owned. So, and when we talk about that Seattle-San Fran game, what are we doing with that? Because that's the late game, and it's incomplete information. We don't know who's playing running back for either team, really. I guess San Fran to some degree, but we don't know what the distribution is going to be as far as Coleman. We know McKinnon's got those tired legs, whatever that means.
Right.
Is he well rested now after like barely not playing last week? Is he less tired?
I never heard that one in all my years of doing football. Tired legs, like it's kind of baked in. You're a football player. You should have some damn tired legs. What does that mean?
I have tired legs, but I'm not sitting up today.
Right.
That's just Dalvin Cook is somebody that I think people are going to mostly avoid. I'm checking out our ownership stuff right now, and I'm sure Devin has up on the screen as far as the lineup HQ here. I have DK's ownership, and obviously this stuff's adjusted and changed the closer and closer we get the lock. We're still 2.5 hours out. All the guys at the top we kind of mentioned. Williams at 35%. This is for tournaments. Hunt at 33%. Henry at 25. Kamara at 24.5. Jacobs I skipped over, but certainly he's interesting as well at 17 and change. Taylor at 14. Bernard at 13.8 is interesting because I thought that would be a little bit higher, but like I said, I was able to get a void. I don't want to say a void. That's probably the right way to say it, but he's not on my cash games right now on DK. And then there's Cook at 11.4 against the Packers. And better than most, the Packer defense, we're not afraid of it, right?
No, not at all. I mean, this is a bottom 10 run D in the league. So I love Cook. I actually put him in my video this week because I figured he'd be the guy of the stud running backs, the Henrys, the Camaras, the higher price guys that gets left out. And it makes sense. I mean, generally we don't want our running back at 7-point underdogs on the road. That's not a favorable spot, but I do think Minnesota can stay competitive in this game. Even if they do get down, he can be the pass catching back as well. Good history against this team. And again, I do think they can hang in this game. So he's just given us such a good floor. I mean, all you do is look at the game logs. I mean, this dude produces every single week. We know the ceiling is there as well. The matchup is there. The ownership is where we want it to be. So he is one of those pivots. The worry is, do the Packers just blitz this team and then we don't get the upside? Even with all the receptions, it kind of takes away from some of the touchdown upside. So I like him a lot in tournaments, cash games. I think you're better off with some of those guys we already talked about.
See a question in chat. David's asking Hunt or Gio in DK cash. They're obviously not the same price, but no. I think Hunt's the better play if you can make that work. And he's currently in mine, I believe. The Dolphins today, Tua, not a soft landing spot. He's coming off the bye. The Rams are a tough defense, and I think he's really interesting. He feels like a wild card going forward. It's kind of a wait and see. And, sometimes in DFS, you're not supposed to wait and see because once you see, then all of a sudden everybody else saw it and there's no edge. I saw somebody, I tweet out, give me your hot takes today. Somebody tweeted to me, Tua's going to be a top 5 quarterback today. Maybe he is. And maybe that's why Tua's taking over. It's not so much a tank move. It's just like Tua's showing so much in practice and he is the future. So why not unleash him? Let's see what he can do. And we know he's got this great pedigree coming out of Alabama. He's got some legs as well too. I don't know what to do there. Maybe does he dump off the Gaskin as a safety? What's your thoughts as far as the Miami offense in general today?
I think Gaskin is still too cheap, and it's not a great matchup here with the Rams. We know that, but you can run on them. It's not, as good as Aaron Donald is, they're not unstoppable against the run. So I feel better about that than trying to attack Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey through the passing game.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of Tua. I think the move was kind of shocking, but clearly he was the guy. He looked good in practice. I do like the weaponry there, but I will have some Gaskin today. Again, I think he's too cheap. As far as the passing game, kind of off of that. I don't mind the passing game on the other side, choosing a receiver there, but Gaskin for me out of Miami. Again, he's good value and not really going to be owned this week.
I assume Howard's not going to play again today as far as a touchdown vulture. He's been DNP the last couple of days, last couple of weeks, but I would want to confirm that to make me feel a little bit better as far as him getting some goal line work. So do you have a plan for Seattle in case things go haywire? Because there's 3 4:00 games. You won't know the actives and inactives until an hour and a half beforehand, as far as making like a 2v2 or a 3v3, however you want to set yourself up. But there is a possibility, there is a scenario where Hyde we're expecting out. Like I'm not sure if he's officially been rolled out, but
he's doubtful, so that usually leans to he's not playing.
Yeah, and Carroll plays games, and they said he was week to week, like immediately after the game or something like that. He's not. Yeah, I don't expect him to play. Carson is supposedly a true 50-50. I saw, I think it was a Schefter report. Then there's Homer. Then there's DJ Dallas, who I'm told is a person who played for a running back for the University of Miami.
Yes, sir. That's factual.
Is it possible? If the scenario plays out that Carson and Homer sit, do we save some sort of like 2v2, 3v3 for Dallas? Now, you could also pivot, like if it doesn't crack that way, just play Coleman at 4K as well on DK, who's the same exact price. And he's going to be active, and we don't know what. I think he's an interesting wild card in this game. Maybe Seattle just says, screw it, we're just going to pass the ball 50 times because we got Russ, and why do we need to give the ball to DJ Dallas 20 times?
I'm kind of off of the situation. I think no matter how it plays out, if Carson's in there, do we really trust him? Is he 100%? I know he wants to play every game. That's kind of what factors into this. He got hurt last time. He was supposed to be out for 3 weeks. He ends up in. He gets hurt this week. He's supposed to be out 2 weeks. Now he's 50-50. I don't think he goes. I don't know how much DJ Dallas I want. And it's for that last point that you said. I think this will just be all Russ. And yeah, he'll get some work, no doubt. Can he get enough work? Can he do enough to win me a tournament? I just don't see that out of a guy we've barely seen anything out of. I like the player. I remember him at Miami, Dean. He is an actual person. I just don't know that he has enough upside to get me there. So some people will take advantage of that, no doubt. The price is certainly there. If he's the only running back, we love the volume, but I think it's going to be a lot of Russ, a lot of the short passing game. Lockett, Metcalf, obviously, we will talk about here coming up. And as far as San Francisco, that's always a mess. I mean, Tevin Coleman was probably the guy here, but how much does McKinnon work in? Do they want to get the ball to Hasty anymore? It's just an avoid for me. There's too many other good running backs in good spots for me to want to attack this.
I'm prepping myself for 2 Kyle Juszczyk, 1 yard touchdown run.
So you could have that as well.
That's going to be the worst. That's going to be so tilty. So as a DFS analyst, DFS tout, whatever you want to call yourself, what other people want to call you, you're contract obligated to have a Le'Veon Bell take.
Oh, yeah.
He's not going to be owned. More so on DK. On FanDuel, he's like 6K. I think he's 4.5 on DK. I have a take. Everybody, I have to have one too. Otherwise, I'll be fired in the spot. But what's your take as far as Le'Veon?
I love me some narrative street. So here's the thing. I was not a Le'Veon guy going into the season, and we all had the same concerns. It's the Jets. Does he want to be there? Do they want him there? Well, now he gets to bottle all of that up, and it's not just the narrative street. We're talking about the Chiefs as a 19.5, 20-point favorite here. So they can pretty much do whatever they want. Now, do they go out of their way to get this guy a touchdown? I kind of think they do. And we saw him work in. It wasn't quite a 50-50 split, but they didn't bring him in to not use him. And in a game like this, not only is it the narrative, but you're a heavy favorite. You could see a whole second half of Le'Veon Bell carving up this defense in this matchup. So home favorite, check. Narrative street, check. I mean, there's just a lot of boxes they could check. No ownership. There is upside there. Generally, I don't like recommending backup running backs, but when a team's going to score 35 points, there's enough to go around to a lot of different places. So I will be playing Le'Veon Bell. I feel good. The beer gut as well, Dean. He's going to score a touchdown today, maybe 2. So there's a bold call for you. I am very high in Le'Veon this week.
So DK thinks he's going to score a touchdown as well. Also, I was listening to the premium show with the STL cards and Tip and Pick and DB, and they were talking about the odds from in the DK Sportsbook, and it was even, basically even, like 106, I think. as far as him scoring a touchdown. And I'll take it even further down the narrative. And, well, a couple things. First of all, in a small sample size, CEH has historically been a dreadful goal line back. Now, again, it's the only sample we have, but he's been dreadful on the goal line. Andy Reid is a player's coach. Also, like, he could have went to 3 or 4 different teams and he was negotiating. He's like, oh, wait, which one of you guys are playing the Jets? Okay, that's where I'm going.
Right.
And, like, he turned to Andy and said, listen, when this game goes down, you got to hook me up. Like, something like that happened. That conversation happened. At least in my head, that happened. And, and they're gonna look at each other when it happens. And I told you, there it is. Yeah, he's gonna get a touchdown. It's gonna happen. And also, if the game stays close, it's certainly possible it stays close. He still gets 35, 45% of the snaps.
Right.
I think, at least in my head. I will say, on the flip side of this, absolutely nobody's playing CEH, and he's a really interesting tournament play. Like, nobody's talking about him. Nobody's mentioning him. Besides, I did.
Yeah, I have a lineup with both of them. What if they score all the touchdowns?
Melvin Gordon narrative. What's his name? Lindsey's expected to play. I saw a report. He's most likely going to play. It's a later game as well, too. Melvin Gordon is like in the same bucket to me as Todd Gurley. Like, he's just kind of found a way to keep cashing those checks, and he puts up stats, but I don't know how good he is. I don't know if that matters. I don't think the matchup is good, but I guess he's somebody that's playable. They're talking about him, chat, as far as the Gordon narrative. And I guess I'm less enthused. He's probably not going to make the cut for me, but I hear you. Thoughts?
I got to limit one narrative per week, so I'm going Le'Veon over Gordon. I mean, I get it. I like those narratives as well. I just haven't been impressed with Melvin Gordon. I guess you could make the same argument for Le'Veon Bell here, but it's a much better matchup for Bell. Team total 35. I'm with you. Gordon's fine. It just doesn't make the cut for me.
I think Swift and Taylor are both interesting in the one dome game, but like I'm not thrilled. Maybe Taylor gets more of a chunk after the bye. He's been getting a decent amount of share, but like, why are we giving the ball to Wilkins? What are we doing here? Jeff, thoughts on those running backs? Swift, his stuff has been going up as well too, and that Indy defense has been spectacular, but they faced nobody, so Are we sure they're spectacular? I don't know. Thoughts?
It's just two backfields where they want to work in multiple guys. Detroit is determined to give Adrian Peterson carries, and that's Patricia coming from the Bill Belichick tree. We got to use as many running backs as possible instead of giving clearly the most talented guy all the work. And Indy's kind of in the same boat. In what world are we giving Jordan Wilkins carries and over a guy like Jonathan Taylor? So more so Taylor, more so intriguing on FanDuel. I do think the touchdown upside is there for him, but just tough to unlock the ceiling. That's the problem with these two.
All right. Do you want to mention that the link's just been dropped in chat? So shout out to the people as far as Devin, he's showing off. You see in the back, we can't see, at least I can't see it, but I'm assured that behind us, you guys can see a lot of the RG premium stuff. You want to use it at your own leisure. Get yourself $5 off your first month subscription. Feel free to click that link, have at it. Just did a refresh on FanDuel as far as the single entry series. Still plenty of spots as far as the spike. It looks like there's about, almost 1,000 spots remaining there, 400 spots remaining in the cover 2, and about 1,300 spots remaining in the sweep. So go ahead and check those out. Again, best single entry contest on FanDuel. As far as I can tell, I'm in them every single week. Let's segue to wide receivers, where DK forgot to pump up the price as far as Allen. Of course, he didn't score a touchdown last week. Didn't matter. He still got there. So much volume. Why is he 6.2K? That's kind of goofy, and you got to play him in cash, right?
Yeah, that's definitely. It's another one of those, if you want to get away from the ownership in tournaments, but you still want some exposure to a great spot and a tremendous price. I mean, he should be right there with Lockett, I think. 7K is probably a good price for Keenan Allen. So cash games, the way to go there. Tournaments, I'm a fade there on Keenan Allen. I know you brought up Herbert. I like that spot as well, but the highly owned receivers to me are easy to avoid. There's other ways that we can go. It's not a game that I'm overly looking to attack. We've kind of hit on it in passing. So tournaments, I will be off of Keenan Allen this week.
I told Jamino today, he does our ownership projection, him and his team, obviously. I said, I feel like this is like the hardest week to do it. And he's like, yeah, last week was supposed to be really hard, and he nailed it. Apparently, they're like at 93, 94% as far as nailing the ownership. I'm not exactly sure what sort of wiggle room they give them each way, but they were all over it. I think it's really, really hard to project ownership this week just because of, all the weather and trying to predict how people are going to react to that weather. Devontae Adams, 17% right now. The price is up. The weather is shaky, especially the way it's projected in the first half. Again, stay tuned for Roth. Roth will be on at 12:30, give you the live update, the most up-to-date update as far as what's going down weather-wise. Yeah, there's also a link we can go ahead and drop in chat as far as the weather report he gave not too long ago as well. I think they can use him as like an extension of the running game. Like that was a thought process I can have, and maybe they just throw like wide receiver screens to Adams and get like 5-yard chunks. Is that something they can do? Of course, you can take advantage of that more so on DK than on FanDuel. It's nice anywhere, but the price is high and it's hard to kind of make work for tournaments for sure. You still got to work them in, but doesn't make the cash game build. You have an official stance here. Let's talk about weather. Devontae Adams.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I mean, I wouldn't use him as a one-off. If anything, I would kind of attack this game that people are going to avoid. I have a Rodgers, Adams running it back with Dalvin Cook, hoping you get a game that stays close and competitive. It's expensive, no doubt. You know, it's something I don't think a lot of people are going to do, and that's why I want to do it. So yes, the price is up there, but they can use him. You know, how many times have we seen Rodgers just turn and throwing the ball, or the old back shoulder throws? You know, they don't have to attack down the field. And who's getting anywhere close to the target volume that this guy is just getting? I mean, 16, 17 targets every single week. So yes, it's windy. Yes, that may affect some of the 40, 50-yard bombs, and maybe we don't get 40 fantasy points out of them, but I still think we're going to get a productive game out here. The win's it's not going to be a 3-0 game. It's still a 50-point total. And they get close to the goal line. They love to throw to this guy too. So I still think there's plenty of upside, and if people are going to bail, I have no problems jumping in and attacking the spot.
When you can lock a receiver in that has a team total of 14.5 points, you got to do it.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's DFS 101. You got to attack that.
Of course, that's the Denzel Mims segue. Amazing pedigree. He made his season debut last week. He was on the field, I believe, for 98% of the snaps. I assume that I'm not sure if Crowder's been officially ruled out, but as far as I know, he was doubtful last night. Perriman expected out as well too. There's going to be a comeback against Kansas City, presumably. Look, the player profiler page says if you look at his stuff as far as his 40 and all the bursts and all the metrics and the analytics, he's the next Chris Godwin. That is his comp.
There we go.
You're getting Chris Godwin for 3.2K on DK. Like, how do you say no?
You can't. You play him. I actually like him, and I really like Braxton Berrios as well. I think he could be the forgotten guy, and we've seen some big games out of him. But I mean, we know this team is going to have to throw the ball. You know, they're not going to be able to establish the run here against the Chiefs. They're going to be down in this game. Yes, we saw them be competitive against the Bills, but I just don't see any way that they're not throwing the ball 40 times. And it's not going to be to Chris Herndon, and maybe Michael Pirine steal some of that work. But Mims at 3,200, a fantastic play, and Berrios in the same boat. I really like both of those guys here.
Well, do you have any other cheapies you liked that are kind of sort of someone interesting there? New Orleans, obviously, a stand-at receiver. It's a little bit more appealing in that Chicago-New Orleans game. And one of these days, Foles is not going to overthrow Mooney, because every single week he overthrows him by like 20 yards on a clear touchdown, like bomb. Mooney's 3.5K. I know Robinson he's back. We weren't really sure. He had the concussion issue. But I think he's interesting for tournaments. He's certainly a good pivot as well, too. The San Francisco receivers obviously are in play. We talked about how I talked about it last week. It hasn't changed. DK specific. Collectively, as far as yielding fantasy points to wide receivers, the Seattle team has given up 12 more points than the second worst team as far as fantasy points. So, yeah, that's San Fran. What's interesting, we'll get to it in a second, is they've been really good against tight ends. So, and we're all playing Kittle, I think. I'm not sure if we've decided that. The secret chat is probably playing Kittle. I've not gotten an invite to that one. I'm not sure if you got an invite to that. But, but for what it's worth, they haven't really faced any good tight ends either. So there's some goofy stuff baked in. Ayuk, Bourne, any interest in, we talk about Mooney. AJ Green, the corpse of AJ Green has risen. Undertaker gif.
Absolutely.
He's getting all these targets. He's still 4-5 on DK. I am playing him not comfortably. Talk about your cheapies.
I love AJ Green, and that's something I have not said in the preseason, in the regular season. Everybody was talking air yards earlier in the year, and now we're seeing it. You know, we mentioned it with Burrow. All of these guys are getting work. You know, you're getting all of these guys in play. Boyd, Higgins, Green are all just getting a ton of targets in this offense. And on DraftKings, look at the price differential. FanDuel, they're all kind of clumped together. I think the spread is like $600 between them. You go over to DraftKings, he's $4,500. You know, we're talking thousands of dollars cheaper than Higgins and Boyd. I like all of them, but give me that discount on AJ Green for sure. And this matchup does not scare me in the least. Even if it's Malcolm Butler, that's not the same guy that we were talking about years ago. So I love AJ Green here. I like the San Francisco pass catchers a lot. We hit on Garoppolo. Ayuk, I think, will be the primary receiver. Bourne's a way to save some money, a guy that they love to throw to in the red zone. And as far as the Kittle talk, we'll get to that, but Jamal Adams questionable, and I think that's the big domino. If he's in, it makes it a little tougher to play Kittle. Plus, we just Garoppolo and Kittle, he gets all them upside games when all these other guys come in and throw into him. So I'm watching that Adams news. I think that's going to be a big one to watch. But the Jets guys, the San Francisco guys, AJ Green, plenty of value at this position.
All right, a couple of questions in chat we'll knock out for the people. If you're starting a cash game on DK, who are the three players you start with? I think it's Williams, Hunt, and Keenan Allen. Is that a good start for you? Cash games?
I'm fine with that. Again, that pool of running backs, I think it's definitely you want to grab 2 or 3 of those. And Keenan, too cheap. Again, that's a good way to get exposure to him. You still have him. You can still cheer him on today and take advantage of that price. And you don't have to battle that ownership in tournaments.
FanDuel specific wide receivers in cash. And I think this is a good segue to the Seattle receivers. You could be, I don't think it's a chase to play Lockett. I think it's really interesting to play Metcalf in tournaments because Lockett's coming off this absolutely incredible 15 catches, 200 yards, 3 touchdowns, looked insane. It was in prime time. Everybody saw it. Metcalf is more expensive. He got no fantasy points for that chase down. He should have got some. Like DK should have made an executive decision for that chase down, the interception, which is absolutely incredible. So I think Lockett is definitely somebody in play for cash. Easier for me to make work on FanDuel than it is on DK, just the way the build goes. I'm not discouraging him on DK, but I think he's one of the FanDuel cash receivers. But I agree. I don't like the rest of the FanDuel cash prices. I was looking at Brown at 5'9". It's not this great matchup, but Pittsburgh has been vulnerable to the deep ball, and one of these days he's not going to get tackled at the 1-yard line. So I like him, if nothing else, in tournaments. I think Tyreek Hill is a great tournament play that people are probably just going to avoid. I don't know. I'm not really sure where Hill's at. Give me some of your favorite big spend receivers and your thoughts as far as Metcalf versus Lockett.
That situation is really funny to me. Think back a few years and you look at the ownership now on Metcalf. And a few years ago, everybody would have been on Lockett. You could have played DK as the bounce back guy to let you down the week before. But we know the DFS audience, everybody watching, is getting so much smarter. So we're not sneaking anything in here with Metcalf. That being said, I do prefer him this week. I do think he bounces back. We know these guys are both going to get a ton of targets in the red zone. You can definitely play them both. It's a very thin target tree there. So no issues with either of them. Lockett's probably safer. They both have similar upside. So that makes Lockett the better play. But I think Metcalf just comes out and has the bigger game today. So like both of them, I like A.J. Brown. We keep talking Titans and we're talking Derrick Henry, but this guy continues to put big games on the board. They continue to do it without a ton of volume. They're kind of breaking the old metrics here, but I love this matchup for A.J. Brown. So they're in play. And then the cheap guys that we talked about are ways to go, ways to save money. We have not talked New England at all here. So
should we?
And I have some interest in Jacoby Myers. I know we're going to get questions. Is it Gunner? Is it Myers? Is it some of these other guys? I do think that's an interesting spot. It's tough to trust Cam Newton as bad as he's looked, but there's going to be some volume there. So not as high on the pecking order as the Jets or the Niners guys for me, but I have some Jacoby Myers in tournaments. You don't even want to admit that, but that's another way to go and kind of get away from some of that ownership on some of the other cheap guys we're talking about.
Earlier in the week, I did the Pick Six show with 2 really, really sharp guys, Rebar and Daigle. That's on YouTube. You guys can feel free to watch that next Wednesday. It'll be good times. Hey, if you subscribe, you'll get a notification when that show is going down, 9:00. And the point I was trying to make is that one of the games we featured, one of the games you talked about was this Raiders-Browns game, which, by the way, it's down to 47.5. The weather really seems to be at least according to the tweet, the most cautious game as far as weather, as far as wind. And, no Beckham. I thought Landry and Higgins are going to step up. They're kind of interesting. If you want to chase Bryant, by all means, the tight end's still plenty cheap. Ruggs is a guy who I think you can get deep. Obviously, he's a burner. I don't know if you can throw deep today. We shall see. Aguilar has been good as well, too. I'm cautious on this game, especially from the receivers. I guess they're fine, but I have at least a yellow caution flag. Give a general thought as far as these receivers. They're all pretty cheap, but I don't know what to do with them.
I'm kind of staying away from that one. The weather just looks where you want to be underweight, and we've seen that kind of reflect in the ownerships. You know, like talked about, Derek Carr was supposed to be highly owned. He's trending down. So, if anything, it's more the running game for me, and I think some people try to avoid that ownership on Kareem Hunt, but that's the way I want to go here. Not really attack with these wide receivers. So a lot more worried about this spot than say a Green Bay, like we talked about. It's certainly possible that these guys get there. And this was the game of the week, and maybe you want to jump in and attack it. So I don't want to do that personally, but if somebody wants to take advantage of the lower ownership in what was supposed to be one of the better game environments that we have, I mean, I think you either go all in on it and try to, take a bunch of pieces here, or like me, I'm just going to avoid it, play some Kareem Hunt, and nothing really else that interests. Darren Waller, of course, interesting at the tight end position. He can still get a lot of those short targets. Ruggs is not just a deep threat. They could get more creative and get the ball in his hands closer to the line of scrimmage as well. So, yeah, they're intriguing. They're just not making the cut for me personally.
I think they'll get him some wide receiver screens like they should.
Oh, yeah.
I think that makes sense. Sustained winds, 25 to 30 miles per hour, gust likely around 45. This is as of an hour or two ago. And now it is sometimes the weather, it's a little bit different inside the stadium. Some teams build the stadium more with that in mind. Some teams don't. So who knows what it is exactly. Maybe outside the stadium it's different. And that's where it gets kind of goofy. All right, you mentioned Waller. Let's talk about tight ends. And, Kittle is going to be the guy people are going to want there in the passing game against Seattle. How do we feel about him? And, if you play the ownership game again, I assume his ownership, let's go ahead and check it out before we go ahead and make any assumptions. Yeah, he's basically twice the ownership. Let's say DK, depends where I'm shopping. I'm jumping around. My thought process is Kelsey, and then you mentioned Waller as well too. And Kittle at 20%, Waller at 14, Kelsey at 11. That's our early projections. What do we do with that?
Again, Jamal Adams is a big domino. I don't think a lot of people are going to be following. We follow the big injuries and the news for the guys we want to play, and sometimes we forget about offensive lines. Or Jamal Adams is a difference maker, and he can take a tight end out of the game. You mix that with Garoppolo, who those guys, yeah, they have a connection, but for some reason it's just not as strong as you'd expect. So that's just news I'm going to watch. We'll see when that news drops, but perfectly fine going to Kelsey. We talked the Chiefs. All the worries, they're going to blow them out. They're only going to play 2 quarters, but like I said, maybe he's got 2 touchdowns at the half and he's lapping the field at the position. So anytime I can get 10% owned Travis Kelsey, sure, it's expensive, but you run it back with some of those value receivers on the Jets and you kind of get rid of some of those costs. So no problems there. I think Jonnu Smith is in play. The guy I really like here that's going to be forgotten is Noah Fant. And I know he doesn't look healthy, and there's certainly concerns there, but did see 7 targets, almost doubled the snap count of Albert O. I know that's a concern as well, but Noah Fant is a guy I have a very, very good feeling about today. The Chargers have struggled against this position. Nobody's going to play him. The price is fair. We've seen the upside. This dude's an athletic freak. I like Noah Fant a lot today.
Do we know if Patrick is in or out yet, or he's still questionable?
Still questionable, I believe. I've not seen that for sure, and that would certainly help. I mean, I like him regardless, but if Patrick's out, you're talking about even a narrow target tree there. And Drew Lock, not great, no doubt, but Noah Fant in a good spot here.
Yeah, my issue with tight end is typically I feel it's a low opportunity cost position, but I feel like if it's not Kittle, it's going to be Waller. If it's not Waller, it's going to be Kelsey. I think one of those 3 puts up a big number, maybe 2, possibly 3. So I'm concerned with the opportunity cost. And weeks past, week 1 through 4, you got away with a 0 sometimes and still cashed pretty nicely if everything else kind of worked out for you at tight end. I don't think that's the case today. So that's sort of my caution. And anybody else that's sort of cheap? Henry in the conversation. Jonnu Smith is 4-1 on DK, which I think is a pretty reasonable price. It's moved down a little bit. Brian moved up to 3.2, but I think he's still playable. Andrews, nobody's going to play. I don't know if I am either. I'm more likely to be on Brown than on Andrews, but sure, at 3%, why not? And Cook, New Orleans is thin on receivers. Yep. Why not Cook? Gesicki, they talk about the tight end being like the blanket for new quarterbacks and that kind of thing, and maybe a bounce back game for him. Anybody else off the board you like as far as tight end? Because it's tough. I'm having a hard time not playing and not spending up for a big boy, and maybe that's a mistake.
I really like Andrews. I know this is not a great game environment. We talked about Lamar and some of the upside there, and I know you've mentioned Brown, the running attack. I'm having a hard time having a lot of faith in a Dobbins or an Edwards, but Andrews at this kind of ownership, and we know they get close. They're looking for him. So the touchdown upside through the roof here. It's a 51 point game total. So yes, we expect it to be defensive, but there will be points scored. So Andrews is in that same category. You know, he's not quite as good as a Kittle, Kelsey, or coming into the season. He was most people's third tight end. So that upside is there at 2-3% owned. What's to say Andrews can't outscore Kittle or Kelsey here this week? So this is one of those. It's an ugly game. It's not a game people want to attack. But when I can get a Mark Andrews at 2-3% owned, that's something I want to take advantage of because he does have the ceiling to get me close to those guys.
We're going to step aside and make way in about 5 minutes for Tambo and Britt. They're going to be showing off the lineup HQ, talk from a tournament perspective mostly, and show off some of the RG tools. Of course, if you guys want those at your own leisure, feel free to check out that link that's going to drop in chat momentarily right now. I don't know if we timed it right or not. You guys won't know anyway because, you know, you're on a time difference. But Devin, I'm sure, was all over it, our fabulous multitasking producer. Get yourself $5 off your first month of RG Core for Premium. Defenses, we usually don't have enough time for defenses, but it's two-man booth, so hey, let's Grant's not mucking it up today. How about that? Shots fired. I don't know. He might be back. I'm kidding. Hi, Grant, if you're watching. Give me some of your favorite defenses today.
The Chiefs, I think you got to start there. I mean, we've been targeting the Jets all season long. It's an easy correlation to go with Le'Veon Bell and the Chiefs or Clyde Edwards-Helaire and the Chiefs or both in the Chiefs. Again, I built that lineup as well. So really like them. And I think you can attack some of these weather spots then. You know, the Browns at home against the Raiders, Green Bay, pair them up with Jamal Williams. I don't mind that. So those are mainly the ones I'm using. I also like the Titans. You know, we talked, I like Cincinnati. I like the offense, but you talked about that offensive line. I think the Titans can generate some pressure on Joe Burrow, possibly cause some turnover. So it is possible to like both sides. I could still like Burrow and the passing game, but I think the Titans paired with Derrick Henry makes a lot of sense here as well.
Yisvan's got it right. Grant just made an appearance in chat, but he said Grant, he's out today with tired legs.
Okay.
We gotta ration his legs. So it's a long season, I suppose. Oh, let's give a shout out to those that are rocking the RG badge these days. We'll drop the link for that as well too. It doesn't cost you anything. You rock the RG badge. You finish the top 10 of certain contests. You get a shout out on the show. That's some added value. The Dark Knight 132123. Matt Harvey. Thanks for watching. Thanks for rocking the RG badge. Give me some of your favorite correlation plays, favorite stacks. What do you have for me?
That Seattle-San Francisco game, I don't think we need to go too in-depth on that. I love the Tennessee-Cincinnati game. So whether you're going with Henry in the Cincinnati passing game or even Tannehill, A.J. Brown, I like that stack. Le'Veon Bell and the Chiefs defense, something I'm going to attack. And then I mentioned the one I think a lot of people aren't going to go to. I'm going to attack this Green Bay game and see what we get. So it's expensive, but at Rodgers paired with Adams, run it back with Dalvin Cook on the other side.
All right. Do you have any bold calls? Any sort of like, this is the guy that's going to take down all the tournaments today? This is the stack's going to take it down. We got to finish strong, George Costanza style. What do you have for me? Give me something bold. Give me something that's going to impress Grant and chat and everybody else.
I mentioned it earlier. Le'Veon Bell scores not only one touchdown, Dean, he scores twice here today, and he is in the winning lineup in these $1 million contests this week.
I'm going to have to get some. I mean, certainly not for cash, but he's more appealing on DK just because of the price. But
yep.
I do agree. I'm gonna play at least a pinch Le'Veon Bell. All right, we're gonna step aside. We're gonna make way. Tambo and Britt are in the bullpen. They're coming in after them. You got Christy and Tuttle. Now there's a lot of questions in chat. They will answer your questions on crunch time. Roth is normally really good at mediating that, just sort of asking questions. But we need Roth today. If you care about weather, if you think weather matters, he's gonna answer all your weather questions at 12:30 Eastern. So stick around. Taking you guys all up to lock. That said, he was Beer, I was Dean, this was football. Thanks, Devo. We're out of here. Holler.
We're here back in the Fantasy Bar. 6 of my favorite plays for Week 8 on FanDuel and DraftKings, including my favorite stud running back I'm expecting to be low-owned, a stroll down narrative street this week. And what game am I stacking up? Belly up to the Fantasy Bar and find out. Welcome in, guys. Week 8 edition Beers Daily Fantasy 6-pack, cruising right along here. Season about halfway over. Unbelievable, but good to be back here once again in the Fantasy Bar, providing 6 guys fresh off the tap for you on FanDuel and DraftKings. Before we take a look at Week 8, let's take a quick look back at Week 7. Not a bad week here. You know, had some nice hits. The Detroit-Atlanta game kind of went as we expected, got our points there, even if they were mistakenly scored by Todd Gurley. The production was there nonetheless. Watson was good outside of the Aaron Jones debacle and switching to Chris Carson, who got hurt. We saw Tyler Lockett go nuts. All in all, a pretty good Week 7, but we can be better. Let's do better here in Week 8. Looking forward to this slate here. No doubt. Looks like a fun slate of games. So let's start at the running back position. I promised you a stud I think is going to go overlooked here, and that's Dalvin Cook of the Vikings against Green Bay. So we got some guys in some good spots. We know Alvin Kamara going to have ownership anytime Michael Thomas is out of the lineup. Derrick Henry going to be heavily owned here on this slate. There's Kareem Hunt, another guy that should garner a ton of ownership. One guy who will not is Dalvin Cook, coming off the injury. I know people are going to kind of tread lightly. Let's wait and see what happens. But they did have a bye week last week. Sounds like he's 100% ready to go here. So I'm not going to be on the sidelines here with Dalvin Cook. I'm jumping in full steam ahead with this matchup against the Green Bay Packers. There is not a team in the NFL that's allowed more production to the running back position than the Packers have. It's my team. It's hard to say, but we put that aside. We put that fandom away, and we say this is a great matchup. Dalvin Cook, 2 touchdowns in that Week 1 game against this team. Not a team that tends to spread the running back touches out a ton. We know Madison will work in, but I don't think they ease Dalvin Cook back in here. So I think we get full bore, 100% workhorse Dalvin Cook here. FanDuel price will scare people away. There's cheaper guys people want to pay. Same thing over on DraftKings. He's the guy I think provides tremendous leverage off some of these other running backs in an amazing spot here against the Green Bay Packers. All right, let's go to tight end. Another guy I expect to go completely overlooked on the slate, Noah Fant of the Broncos. So we saw him come back from injury last week, did see 7 targets. The talk of the town, though, is his teammate at tight end, Albert O, who put up more production with the same 7 targets. So I think people are going to chase that. And I get it. Drew Lock, Albert O have that Missouri connection. He's cheaper, no doubt. But Noah Fant, we know, is a stud. Get the ball in his hands. This guy can make things happen. Now, let's take a look at the rest of this Denver pass-catching core. We know Cortland Sutton out for the season. Tim Patrick really looking iffy to play here. That really leaves Jerry Jeudy, a cast of characters at the wide receiver position, and Noah Fant and Albert O. And this matchup pretty good. The Chargers not been good against the tight end. In fact, bottom 10 in allowing fantasy points per game to this position. So the targets were there last week. The production was not, but it's almost double the snaps that his teammate Albert O did. I'm not worried about Noah Fant here. I'm not worried about Big Albert passing him up in the pecking order. And without Tim Patrick potentially in that lineup, and even if he is in there, still interested in Noah Fant. Looks like sub 5% ownership in a good matchup here with the Los Angeles Chargers. All right, moving on. Our next pick. Let's take a stroll down Narrative Street. Love to have some fun here in the Fantasy Bar. We're going to do that. We're running back Le'Veon Bell of the Chiefs against his former employer and coach, Adam Gase. So this one definitely not for everybody, guys. I certainly understand that. And that's the beauty of the 6-pack. You don't have to use everybody. In fact, you don't have to use anybody if they don't match up with your research. I'm just telling you who I like, and I'm going to have some fun here with Le'Veon Bell, but it's not just the Narrative Street here. We also have some substance to go along with it. But let's stroll on Narrative Street here for a minute. Now, we know the Jets and Le'Veon Bell was not a pairing that either seemed to really like. It never seemed like the Jets or Adam Gase really ever wanted this guy around. Never seemed like Bell even wanted to be there or gave his all. So now he goes to Kansas City. We saw him in his first game action with Clyde Edwards-Helaire work in, get a good amount of touches, had 6 carries. Clyde Edwards-Helaire only had 8 in that game, so he will be a part of this backfield. But let's step aside from Narrative Street here, and let's just look at the numbers here. The Kansas City Chiefs are 20-point favorites in this game at home, 19.5, whatever you may get it at. That is one of the biggest spreads that we're going to see all season long. In fact, that's probably the biggest spread that we'll see. So what does that mean? A, it means they're going to have multiple opportunities to score the football. And you know Le'Veon Bell is begging for opportunity to score the football here, so they're going to have chances for both of these guys to be productive here. If they get off to a big lead, why would they grind Clyde Edwards-Helaire into the ground When we can give Le'Veon Bell the ball 10, 12, 15 times here in a good matchup with the New York Jets. So yes, it's narrative street. Yes, we joke around with that, but it's also a tremendous spot for a bunch of Kansas City Chiefs to go off in this matchup. Their projected team total is approaching 35 points. That's 5 touchdowns to go around, and I'm going to call the Le'Veon Bell touchdown here. The beer gut telling me he's going to score. The Jets, 5th most fantasy points allowed to the running back position. So you tie it all together. Not only do we get narrative street, not only do we get a great price here on Bell at 4,600, who can be effective in the passing game as well, we also get a good matchup and a massive home favorite. Having some fun here, but I do love Le'Veon Bell. I'm going to be a big part of my builds, especially on DraftKings at just 4,600. All right, let's stay in that price range, trying to save you guys some money. Let's go to the wide receiver position with AJ Green of the Bengals. So Green really has had a resurgence here. We know the air yards have been there all season long. We have watched his teammate T. Higgins arrive on the scene. We've seen Tyler Boyd be consistent like we know he's been over the last few seasons. But AJ Green, besides those air yards the first few weeks, not much to put in the stat sheet, but we're talking 12 targets per game over the last 2 weeks, a ton of receptions. And the thing that's been missing, the touchdowns. For the amount of receptions and yards that he has, the touchdowns are coming sooner rather than later. Now, let's look at that price. On FanDuel, you got these guys all kind of priced together, but on DraftKings, we're talking about AJ Green $1,100 cheaper than T. Higgins, $2,100 cheaper than Tyler Boyd, which is absolutely ludicrous here. Give me the cheaper of the three. All three guys certainly viable here. A stack is viable, but AJ Green at that price point to me stands out in all formats. And the Titans have really struggled against the wide receiver position, 6th most touchdowns allowed. And I think AJ Green does find the end zone this week. We talked about that touchdown regression coming, and the 4th most fantasy points allowed as well. I love this game, love this spot, and that price on AJ Green. Love him on FanDuel as well, under 6K. That 4,500 really standing out to me here this week against the Titans. All right, let's stay at wide receiver. Let's stay in that same game, and let's stay with AJ. We're going to go to AJ Brown of the Titans. So a little AJ pairing here, but Brown been phenomenal here. 21 DraftKings points or more in 3 straight games, has scored 4 touchdowns over those games. We look at some ownership, and Derrick Henry, you guys know I love me some Derrick Henry, was very good to us a couple weeks ago, but he's looking like one of the highest owned players on this slate, and with good reason. I will be playing some Derrick Henry here as well, no doubt, but the passing game really provides that leverage. But we've seen many a times where Derrick Henry's in a great spot, and it's the passing game that goes off. So both are in play, both are viable, don't get me wrong here, but I'm going to go with AJ Brown here this week. The Titans, huge projected team total. We talked about that massive 34-point team total for the Chiefs, not quite that high, but they are approaching 30 here. A good matchup with Cincinnati, fair prices across both sides. So I'm loving the AJs this week. AJ Green for the Bengals, and here AJ Brown of the Titans. All right, it's time to take a look at my favorite play for week 8. But before we do that, guys, we're going to continue our Beast of the Week contest, absolutely free to play. All you got to do, get in the comment section of the video, make sure you've hit that thumbs up button for the video, and greatly appreciate that. But all you got to do is guess fantasy points for my Beast of the Week on FanDuel this week. Closest guess will win themselves a free week of Rotogrinders Premium. That's going to give you access to everything behind the scenes, including our Lineup HQ tool, which is going to help you build 1 to 150 lineups in a matter of moments. Or if you're already a subscriber, and we thank you for that, we'll send you a free Rotogrinders t-shirt. So let's get to it. Who is it? Let's take a look. My favorite play for week 8. No mask, the Beast of the Week. All right, Beast time. One more position to fill here, and that's quarterback. We're going to stay in that same game. I love both sides of that Bengals-Titans game, but we're going to go with Ryan Tannehill of the Titans, this week's Beast of the Week. So again, I mentioned great leverage here with the passing game off Derrick Henry, so we're going to take it to another level here, and we're going to pair A.J. Brown with Ryan Tannehill. But let's take a look at some of the numbers here for Tannehill. Multiple touchdown passes now in 5 of the 6 games this team has played this season. And even the game where he didn't get there, still threw for a ton of yards in that game. Cincinnati been absolutely carved up by quarterbacks over the last couple weeks. Baker Mayfield put 5 touchdowns on the board last week. Phillip Rivers even had multiple touchdowns against this team. 8 passing touchdowns allowed over just the last 2 weeks. This is a defense that ranks near the bottom of DVOA against the pass and the Cincinnati offense. We talked about the receivers. Gio Bernard, I think, is interesting here this week as well, but they are playing very well. Both these teams play at a very fast pace. I think Cincinnati can do enough and hang in this game.
What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, aka Toe Tag and Tambo, back for another edition of the Sunday Lineup HQ show. This week, another newbie here. My first time going on with the guy, Mr. Britt Devine. How you doing, Britt?
I don't know if I'm a newbie. I mean, I've been doing this for what, like 7-8
Yeah.
years now. But with you, yeah, fun to get on.
I'm the newbie, bringing on the new guy, another guy that I haven't been on with yet. You got it, exactly.
Yeah, I've seen you on. I've been liking these shows. A variety of guests. It's fun to sort of use Lineup HQ to make teams if you're multi-entering. And we were talking pre-show. This is basically a one-off week in DFS. I think I've never really seen anything like this where we have so many weather games. We have a possible $4,000 running back that could be viable at 3 o'clock. That's really hard to kind of jam into your lineups now. Just a really strange one game with Russell Wilson that everybody's going to want to use today. Just a really strange DFS ownership just across the board type of week, in my opinion.
Oh, I agree. It's like you said, we've seen weather games, we've seen weather situations. We don't normally see this many weather games with this much red, green, or, you got all the colors of the entire rainbow here. So we can start there, I guess, and maybe just talk to me about it a little bit, Britt, as far as what you're seeing and what maybe your concerns are when it comes to some of these weather updates that our main man, Kevin Roth, has plugged in here.
Yeah, so you see what Roth and, October's over, right? It's Christmas music season, and we got the Christmas tree colors going up on the weather page here on Rotogrinders, right? So we've got the Cincinnati game where if there was no weather in this game, I think we could have really gone to Joe Burrow. We're going to have some, of course, Derrick Henry's going to get his today, but maybe the ownership, I think, might come down a little bit too low in that game. So I do like Joe Burrow stacks a little bit. You can mix those in with Derrick Henry. There's some leverage plays we'll talk about on the Tennessee side as we progress through it. You got this weird 20-point total in Kansas City, right? Has that really ever happened? Not very often in DFS. The big home favorites last year really covered when the Patriots were cruising. So we got to see what the Chiefs do this week. I think it's probably going to be a bloodbath, a little Halloween pun there. But how often is Tyreek Hill going to get his 10 receptions? Very, very little. Amount of the time, I think. So that's a little bit of a strange game. We got a rookie quarterback that's low price, but he's going up against a tough defense in the Rams. I like the Rams side of this game quite a bit. If you got access to a sports book, all my Tennessee people, right? You guys got access to it this morning. I like the Rams. I got it at -4 on Monday. It's -3.5 now. There's a lot of weird Vegas stuff, west to east, early game, short week, but I still like the Rams in that game quite a bit. You got Cam Newton in Buffalo. That game just looks really ugly from a lot of perspectives, in my opinion. Who are you going to use? You got weather. That game pretty much doesn't exist to me outside of close to like a naked Josh Allen. The real weather game, the Cleveland game, can be really ugly. Weird things can happen, though. You've got the two running backs I think are going to be pretty popular. Maybe Jarvis Landry, maybe Harrison Bryant. Maybe these guys get a couple of short yardage targets that make them viable. You got two really good teams in Pittsburgh and Baltimore. You got weather in Green Bay. The wind's coming down a little bit in Chicago. Just a completely one-off week that we've ever really seen before. I think ownership's going to get pretty concentrated on that Seattle-San Francisco game, even more than what we have so far in Lineup HQ. I saw Jamino, too, by the way. I thought it was really funny on the ownership show with E. Scott. With the hamster wheel he had going on there. So Devin, I thought that was really funny seeing that this week.
Yeah, I got to go back. Devin told me to watch it, and it was mentioned yesterday. I forgot to tune in, but I got to go back and see this because everybody around here has been talking about it. So
It was hilarious.
I'm going to go back and check that out. It's not too often we hear producer Devin in our ear laughing a little bit. So it's obviously incredibly funny. So definitely got to check that out. Circling back here, I think just a couple of things that stand out to me, because we'll just, spend a few more minutes on this and then move on as we normally do. But, Derrick Henry, I think it gets even more of a bump, like you said, in that game, because the fact that people don't want to be on that. The other interesting note is with the Cincinnati side, it kind of pains me a little bit. I was wanting to be off Burrow because I thought he was going to be so extremely high owned. And I knew about the O-line issues. People have been talking about the underlying, thing there with Mixon out, 3 O-line guys done. And then the situation with the weather has kind of dampened that a little bit. So we'll see what that looks like when we move over to position by position. I'm with you. I've come down a little bit on these next 2 games. I like the Josh Allen stacks a little bit before the weather because, I thought with John Brown coming back, the games that he played poorly were the games without John Brown. I think with John Brown there, it was able to have him and Diggs and spread it out, but I'm still a little bit interested. Gilmore got ruled out. So, there's an opportunity for Diggs there to really eat. And like I said, the fact that John Brown's back. So I'm still going to stick with the Buffalo side for a few stacks, but not too much. And then the big one for me is this one, the Las Vegas Raiders and the Cleveland Browns. Always, I like Hunt. I think a lot of people do. We'll talk about Kareem Hunt when we get to the running back position. But what are your thoughts? I want to ask you this quick because I think a pretty popular play both in cash and tournaments this week was going to be Darren Waller. And, to me, he's more of a short A-dot yards after catch monster. Like, does this really hurt a guy like that? And are people going to switch gears now because of it?
No, I still like Waller. I think a lot of smart people are probably on Waller this week. The only problem with Waller is if you play Waller, you don't have George Kittle in your lineup. So, you probably shouldn't have both of those in the same lineup. But I do like Waller. I like Jacobs. I like Hunt. Probably no one else in the Las Vegas passing game. Maybe you can convince me, the Jarvis Landry, maybe the Brian at tight end if you're looking for some cost savings there. But this game is really about the run game and Darren Waller. I got no exposure to the quarterbacks in this game. It's just, this is probably the ugliest weather game we've really seen in DFS in recent memory, at least 2 or 3 years, with big winds, sloppy fields, some rain. Just the passing game's pretty much a stay away from me there outside of Waller.
Yeah. I was on Carr to start the week. This is one, like I say, I'll stick with Allen in the game above, but I'm coming down on Carr here, and we'll segue in a second. But you just brought up another good point, to finish off on weather. The last one here, really no concerns for me in Minnesota, Green Bay, only because most of what their guys do is the same. Like, I'm not going to get off Devontae Adams because of some wind. Like, he's going to catch 20 balls possibly, and they're not going to be bombs or anything like that. It's not really how they do business there in Green Bay. So he's really the main side of that game that I was on. But buried the lead a little bit. Obviously, what you do, everything you bring across here to Rotogrinders. For those of you that aren't signed up, producer Devin's going to drop the link in there. You guys can check us out. Most of the stuff of what we're talking about today, between these premium articles, using Lineup HQ, all of those factors are right here. And we're still going to bring you weather and inactive updates and active updates along the way, talk about players. But Britt, you do a great article every week, right? The Millionaire Maker Trends. And this has to be a bit of a polarizing week for you. There's a certain way these things are won, typically, and you follow that quite nicely. And then there's also a one-off week like this with all this weather. And then the thing that made me think of it is you said, you might not want to have Waller and Kittle. And you're right. I followed these articles quite a bit. You never really want 2 tight ends, right? It doesn't seem to work out very often in the Millionaire Maker winning lineup. But we've got a $10 on DraftKings with 400,000 plus people. This type of situation, a one-off week. So talk to us a little bit about this article and then just maybe where you're at in concerns to those thoughts.
Yeah, so this week, if you're playing the Millionaire Maker, it's $10 this week. So you're basically doubling the amount of entries into it. You're at 411,000 people you're going to have to beat. And generally, the larger the contest, the less you should play 2 tight ends together. It doesn't even really matter. So if you're MMEing or hand building, if you're Pete out there and you got the hand cramps, don't be jamming in the 2 tight ends into something like that. It's really prohibitive. But scroll down just a little. I want to talk about the stacking here. Again, this is all premium. If you're looking to check out Rotogrinders Premium, this is something I put in. It gets pretty much rave reviews, comments almost every single week. Going back, if you look at 2018 and 2019, the stacks that won, right? So we have team stacks, game stacks, and then the number of players in each of them. each year, right? 2018, it was basically 50-50. The game stack started to get some talk last year and they started to move ahead. And this year it's just game. If you're not game stacking, you're not trying in these extremely large field tournaments. And I want to stress too, while I talk about the Millionaire Maker article in this, you can apply this to other things, right? There's a lot of 100,000 plus entry contests on DraftKings, and this pretty much applies to all of them across just about any buy-in level. So the game stacks have really been crushing this year, specifically the 4-man game stack. And this is because, right, when Kyler Murray throws to DeAndre Hopkins and you can run it back with pretend like Kenyon Drake and Tyler Lockett on the opposite side of that game, right? Like it just makes sense. You've had to have the game every week that shoots out to have a chance, because we used to have quarterbacks scoring 27 fantasy points and you were able to win a large field tournament with that. And that is not the case this year, because these dudes are dropping 35 and 40. Someone's doing it every single week, and you have to have the game stack tied to that. But then you look at this week, right? There's basically one game we all really like, right? That's the Seattle San Francisco game. The game stack you can create pretty easily, because there's some cheap pieces specifically on the San Francisco side that make it work. Is that the one you're going to need? I don't think it's out of the question. I heard DB talk about it on the premium pod this morning. Like, could you just make all San Francisco Seattle lineups? I normally wouldn't, but if you look at the trends this year, what we have going on in weather right now, what's winning, right, in terms of game stacks, if that's the game that shoots out, you have to have it. I don't care if it's popular. I'm okay going to the popular quarterback wide receiver stacks more than ever, because it's just the new NFL with no fans, with the away teams able to play a little bit better too, right? The penalties, right? There's less holding penalties. There's more defensive penalties. Yeah. That's creating more offense. It's a different NFL than we've really ever played before in DFS, and you've got to adjust to it. So I really like that San Francisco Seattle game. Looking last year, right? Picking the 2% owned quarterback and pairing it up with his 5% owned wide receiver. That was how you won last year. That's how you won in 2018 a lot of the time. And it ain't working anymore. So I'm okay trying to get different elsewhere and really making my lineups with the good quarterback wide receiver stacks and throwing some darts elsewhere.
Yeah, and I don't hate that. It's a good segue into, jumping back over here to Lineup HQ, and you and I talked a little bit before the show. Typically like to go through it, by position at some point, but, starting with ownership and ways we can be different. You just mentioned a great point. Do we get all over that game? We've got a unique week here. We've got it set up where, is it even being owned enough? Look, these two quarterbacks, Jimmy Garoppolo and Russell Wilson, are at the top for a reason. It could go up even more. Let's say it's 30% combined ownership. That's 7 out of every 10 lineups in these large field GPs that don't have that game and really aren't stacking it up, because if you've got these guys, it's game stacks. So it probably isn't that crazy to get 60% or 70% of your lineups, even if you don't want to be all in on this game, because I know some people, are a little bit shy, or, it's all risk versus reward, to each their own. But for me, it wouldn't be crazy to get all over this if you got 3 lineups to do 2 of them with this game stack and just avoid these things. And then if you like some one-offs, like I don't mind if you want to stack this game and then use Kareem Hunt and Darren Waller. They're both pretty fair prices. They're opposite of each other in the same game. It should be Kareem Hunt running the ball down their throat, and then the other side, or you use Josh Jacobs as running back and get Harrison Bryant on the other. These guys still fit in that weather game and can have some upside. So what are your thoughts on that as a whole? And then we'll hop into the position here, Britt.
Yeah, real quick, so it's 11:30. I want to jump into the active inactives real quick, because there's just a couple of things that have popped up here. It looks like the Bengals, we thought they were coming into the week down 3 starting offensive linemen. They have another one out due to illness. So they are down 4 starting offensive linemen in today's game. I question a little bit Joe Burrow. He's been throwing so much, but the dude could get killed today if they're not careful. They don't run the ball with Giovanni Bernard. Burrow is going to throw the ball a ton in the win today. It's, maybe I think Gio's getting a little underlooked because I think a lot of those short passes in Cincinnati might be out there just with how beat up that offensive line is. It looks like the only active tight end for the Patriots is Ryan Izzo. I don't think I could do something like that. That's probably just getting a little bit too cute. Michael Pittman is active. We were sort of expecting that in Indianapolis. Let's see.
Did Mo Alley Cox news? I think that came out too.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen that cross yet. John Ross is still inactive, so that's good for the other Cincinnati passing targets. That's pretty much what we've come to know. Don't really see anything. Yes, Mo Alley Cox is in today. So that does sort of take away some of your pass catching options, I think, in Indianapolis, because I like that Matthew Stafford to Kenny Galladay. That looks pretty good. But I told you pre-show, I have no clue, right? We've got Pittman, we've got all three tight ends. I got no clue who to run that back with. And if you're not running it back in game stacks this year, it's just looking like you're sort of wasting your lineups if you're attempting to win outside of maybe like a Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen running quarterback play. That ain't Phillip Rivers, that ain't Matthew Stafford. You got to run it back and something in there. And it's looking pretty dicey if you can try to pick out Hilton, Pittman, one of the tight ends. You got Zach Pascal, Marcus Johnson popped off in their last game here. It's just really dicey in that game who to run it back with, which would, of course, probably lower my exposure of what I'm looking to do in that game. There's too many pass catchers, which is just really focusing me a little bit more on this Seattle-San Francisco game. We talked about a pre-show. You mentioned it. We've currently got basically 26% ownership of quarterbacks going to that game.
Yeah.
And it's this real weird narrative, at least in the content world, where I think more people than ever subscribe to daily fantasy content sites or watch shows like this one here on Rotogrinders. They've been more people listen to podcasts than ever before, I think, as well. We've been talking about weather all week long. Is this too low of a projected ownership? You mentioned 30. I don't know. It might even get higher than that at the quarterback selection. There's just too much bad weather. This is the spot that is won all season. Russell Wilson has yet to put up basically less than 25 DraftKings points in a game. That's like his lowest performance, with multiples in the 30s. Garoppolo, on the other hand, hasn't put up 25 DraftKings points yet this year, but every quarterback going up against Seattle basically gets there. I don't really do this too often, but I'm okay just jamming in that game today and riding it out.
Yeah, I do like it, like you said, and I'll be using it quite a bit. The price on Garoppolo just seems silly at 5.4K. I know it's
both
missing
sites.
some web, but he's got both sites exactly. But just looking at this right here, and that's why you've got all these sharper guys. If you guys have lineup HQ, all these conviction plays at the top, these guys are all over Jimmy G. For me, I like Russell Wilson. I like paying up. It makes it a little bit more difficult. I think most of the game stacks, or it's very small, the number here that it shows, but it makes your lineup look a lot better when you start with Jimmy Garoppolo. But there's plenty of ways to go with Russell Wilson. And what I love about Russell Wilson is the target tree and how condensed it is. Again, it makes it expensive. It makes it tough, but you can get Lockett, Metcalf, find one of the San Francisco value guys that you like, whoever it might be, and then you could still fit in, different plays throughout your lineup. I guess the bigger conversations down below here, because, I like your Matt Stafford call. For me, it's, Jonathan Taylor, who we'll talk about in a second, the running back. I think there's some opportunity there. Some running backs have had some very big games against the Lions. I know it's scary. His snap share is not always the greatest. There's, Nyheim Hines, Wilkins, all these guys that you never know who Rivers is going to spread it around to too on top of that. So, but I think if they want to run the ball some here, that'd be a good spot. And then you said it, man. We talked about this in the Tourney Takes pod with Killa B and Kirk Dees and myself, but the corpse, or whatever you want to call it, of T.Y. Hilton there at 40, like that's a cheap price for him. We saw it with AJ Green, Juju Smith-Schuster. Once they got to that level of pricing and almost nobody wanted to have a part of them, they have their bounce back game. So that could be a spot this week as well. But any other quarterbacks you want to spend some time on here? Because, one you mentioned earlier, Mahomes and this Kansas City Chiefs game, they're going to smash them. But, we've seen this in the past. Patrick Mahomes has as many DraftKings points at halftime as some of the quarterbacks do on the day for their full, game that they played in the morning, and he's in an afternoon game just destroying them. So, any thoughts on him at the elevated price tag there?
So I don't mind Mahomes. The thing with him, right? So his targets are expensive, but the run backs are cheap, right? So if you're making the game stack, usually the Mahomes stacks are very expensive, especially when they're up against a good team, because the wide receivers are usually 5K, 6K going up against them. We don't have that today. So you can actually make Mahomes stacks work pretty good in your lineup. The problem is if you play Mahomes, with Kelsey, you can maybe mix in one of the running backs or Hill. Is it going to be Demarcus Robinson? Is McCole Hardman going to get a touchdown? Is Le'Veon Bell going to run in 2 today? There's a lot of ways where I don't know. I don't know if he really gets there. The team total is enormous, but I don't know. I think I'm not going to play Sam Darnold stacks, but I would rather sprinkle in, I think, a Kansas City player. There's a lot of them, right? And I think they could just spread the ball, especially with the addition of Le'Veon Bell, too much, not to mention blowout time, or maybe Hardman gets his and Robinson comes in. I think I would just rather sprinkle in the one-offs, because you also get the weird thing where if you play Kansas City, which it looks like Mahomes is going to draw reasonable ownership, I still wouldn't be surprised if a little more of that goes to Russell Wilson and Jimmy Garoppolo than what we have. But your run back is Denzel Mims, who's going to be one of the highest owned wide receivers, which is a little dicey too when you're looking at it from an ownership perspective, because you're still playing this Kansas City game, but you're running it back with the same guy everyone else is using. I just rather take my one-offs in Kansas City. The guys I do like Joe Burrow. He's just going to be passing all game. They're not going to run with Giovanni Bernard. They throw the ball. It's going to be short, quick passes in the wind. I do like that. You got a nice run back in Derrick Henry. If you want the leverage, you play A.J. Brown, you play Jonnu Smith, something like that in your Joe Burrow lineups. I like Justin Herbert quite a bit. I know his ownership is sort of creeped up, but he's looking real good. This was my other bet. I like the Chargers quite a bit against Denver. The quarterback difference between Herbert and Locke is about as big as you can get, other than Mahomes and Sam Darnold. I don't understand why this is like a 3.5 point game here. This should be like a touchdown in my opinion. So I like Herbert quite a bit. You can get different too, right? Everyone's playing Keenan Allen. You can go to Big Mike Williams, right? If he catches a touchdown or two, you got some leverage off Keenan Allen. You can play Hunter Henry, who's going to be reasonably popular. And, Denver, right? You can play Judy. You can play Fant. That's probably about, I want to see, this is a late game, so I don't have news on Tim Patrick. That's sort of like, this is what it's come down to. Is Tim Patrick going to play? But I think you could run it back with Judy or Fant pretty easily in that game. Again, I'd probably be making game stacks today. The other guy is Lamar Jackson, who he has slate winning upside every single time he plays. He had the bye, so maybe his little knee issues feeling a little bit better. It's against Pittsburgh. I don't know. I think he's still the one. Don't know if I'd play him with Mark Andrews. Pittsburgh hasn't just been good against tight ends. They've been great and against good tight ends as well. So I'd play him with maybe Hollywood Brown, play him alone. That's probably my quarterback tree today. It's pretty narrow in my opinion.
Yeah, I like the Lamar call. We talked a little bit about that one as well. The challenge with the Lamar game, and you just talked about the trends and whatnot. And who's the Pittsburgh guy for you that you want to run it back with there? Because
we've got GPP winning Deontay Johnson's $5,500. I don't know what is DraftKings doing making him $5,500? Why was he $4,200?
He was $4,200 last week. I was going to say
Keenan Allen $6,200, right? Like these just don't make sense. Deontay's got 10 plus targets every game. He's been healthy. I know it's a tough matchup, but that's your run back in Lamar Jackson. And I want to stress too, if you happen to do something like you just play Lamar Jackson and maybe you play Deontay Johnson, you need more other correlation in your lineups. We saw this with Blender when he sort of won his 50K a couple of weeks ago. His lineups, I think he uses a lot of the tools and Rotogrinders where you can create extra correlations, right? So if you're just playing Lamar and you're running it back with Deontay Johnson, that's all you're doing, right? Add in a running back defense stack, add in Tyler Lockett and Brandon Ayuk into that lineup, something like that, and create more correlations into your, naked quarterback lineup if you do attempt to do something like that.
Yeah, it's right here in Lineup HQ, guys. If you're using it, you could set up your classic primary stacks. You can mix what percentage of your lineups. You can do it. Blender and I talked about this in the preseason tutorial where we like doing it by quarterback. And then we sort of take these secondary stacks, plug some of those in, build our lineups. And then we can start looking at them. I call it a virtual hand build, right? You're looking at them from what the optimizers spit out for you, but then you're seeing, I like that one. That's probably pretty unique. That might leverage it, and you go from there. So I think we've exhausted quarterback. I like a lot of the takes that you had there. There's not too many others that I'm on. I think the interesting one would be, like you said, in that Kansas City game where they are going to have to throw a bunch. This is the $10 Millie Maker play, but you go to Sam Darnold. You use a couple of those cheap guys or just one if you want to get, off. Most people are using Mims, which will get to wide receiver, where he's 22% as a one-off or as just, to make your lineup work. How many people are stacking up Darnold with Mims and then, bringing back Kelsey or bringing back Tyreek Hill or something. It's not saying it's super likely, but you don't have to go all in on this game stack and have, a 5-man game stack. You just can run Darnold, Mims, Tyreek Hill, and then fill in some other plays. And if that gets there, you've already got quite a bit of leverage on the field, and then you've got all your other plays that fit. I'm telling you, I've done some. Your lineup will look pretty good if you start with that.
I generally like the 4-man game stack specifically this year, but I think this week the 3-man game stacks, even of the good games, or if you're going to try to go to some of the windier games, your lineups just look better price-wise and outcome-wise because of the wind and the weather. If you go to the 3-man game stack, I'm not just playing team stacks. I think are just a dead lineup build in these large field tournaments. You can get by with them in 100-man and 200-man fields, but you're trying to beat 400,000 people. I'm making game stacks. I hope that's the game that goes off, but I do think the 3-man game stacks, just with everything going on this week, salary, weather, all that stuff, look a little bit more appealing to me than they generally do.
Yeah, I agree fully. Let's move over to running back. Britt, we've got plenty of time here still, but just so we get through everything here, we're going to talk about it from a perspective of the chalk at the top first and how we're going to leverage this, what we're doing instead, what can we do to get around this, what your thoughts are about using maybe these guys together. So we talk about this every week on here pretty much, but you've got, always the running back position is the first of the week that the chalk starts to formulate because it's obvious there's a running back out. It's always been the thing in DFS forever. It's evolved some, but once there's a backup running back, it doesn't really matter. And even this week with the price elevation on a guy like Jamal Williams, probably not enough, right? Hence this 35% ownership. I think you got to love Jamal Williams here at 6.1K, regardless of price, but maybe it's sticker shock for some after he was cheaper last week, but he did do quite well. So what's your thoughts on Jamal Williams and then some of the other chalk we've got up here?
It's really hard to not like any of these top 4 running backs. Williams, Hunt, Henry, and Kamara, I think are all in extremely, extremely good spots. Just like last week, side note, was the first time ever that the top 3 highest owned quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers, none of them busted in my, one of them always busts. None of them busted last week. So maybe we're riding high off the chalk smashing last week. But I don't know. If I had to guess one that's the most likely to bust, might be Derrick Henry, because he just doesn't catch a lot of passes. You need some of that sometimes on DraftKings. If he doesn't get the 100 and then 2 touchdowns, he's probably dead in the water in tournaments. Where Alvin Kamara, he's my preferred option between those because there's just nothing else in the Saints offense today. And I heard a couple things this week. Chicago is so good against the running backs, and they limit these running back passes so good. Go look at who they've played this year. It's just a laundry list of just absolutely horrific running back, run blocking, passing even teams. I'm not buying into that at all. So I absolutely love Kamara. I'm going to take the over on 81 receptions for him on the season that he's done in 3 straight years. 10 targets in this game isn't out of the question. And there's many more ways for him to get there than there is for Derrick Henry. Not saying Derrick Henry is going to have a bad game. I certainly like him. I have exposure to him. But I prefer Kamara at the high end there. And of course, Hunt in the weather game. What's not to like there? Jamal Williams, he should be 7,000. Kareem Hunt should be a little bit more. Yeah. I like all of them. Really tough to not use them. The thing I always stress in my articles on the Millionaire Maker is total lineup ownership. That's in the end what really matters when you're trying to factor in ownership. So if your lineup consists of Jamal Williams, Kareem Hunt, and then one of Derrick Henry or Kamara, don't play Denzel Mims, Keenan Allen, Russell Wilson, and Tyler Lockett in the lineup because you're with too much of the field. There's really no way to win. And then if it all works for you, you have to beat like 3,000 other people who also have that exact same lineup. So I wouldn't play all 3 of them. Maybe if I was making a group, I would set something to no more than 2 of those in my lineup and maybe mix it in a little bit differently. I don't think I hand dealt today. Didn't really do when I do the show in the morning. I don't like to make 150. You got to react to too much news. But this is something I think makes a little bit of sense. If
you guys are using the tool here, you can go in groups, as Britt just said. I love something like this typically because it's not saying for sure one is going to bust. It's not what we're saying. Like to your point, Derrick Henry could have a 22-point game. That's not bad. It's just not going to be ideal, and especially not ideal if for $200 more you could have got Kamara, who ends up having 33 or 35. So something like this just separates it a little bit more to make it so that you're guaranteed to be that. I typically will set up something like this as well as when I go in, change maybe my total lineup ownership within the build rules. So we'll talk about that at the end. Alex asked, just going back for a second to these chalk games and game stacks, said you can't three-man a chalk game, can you? And I say no, because if you've got Russell,
can.
but if you've got, I'm saying the point is what I think what he's getting at, where you can have a rebuttal here in a sec. But if I've got Russell Wilson, Lockett, and Kittle today, and they go off, I bet there's almost no way for me to win that tournament. I don't think, because someone else is gonna. If Russell Wilson actually goes off, there's going to be so many other pieces in that game stack that are involved that someone's going to have a 4-man or a 5-man that just trumps me. So either get on it or not. I prefer the 3-man. It's something like you said earlier with, going off the board with Darnold, Mims, and Kelsey, and not as many people are even on that game. And then and that already leverages your lineup as a total. But go ahead. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. So I actually like the 3-mans today with weather. You're not playing Aaron Rodgers with Devontae Adams, with Jamal Williams, and then you're going to run it back with Thielen or Jefferson. That's probably the other one, but that's got a win game. It's expensive. You can save a little bit of money trying to get the 3-man stack. And I don't know. I think they work pretty good today. What you want to do in your 3-man stack, I mentioned this earlier, is the 4-man game stacks require less additional correlations because you're already correlated to your main stack so much once you basically get to 4. So when you make the 3-man game stacks, if you want to separate yourself, this is where you add in, let's say, Derrick Henry and the Titans defense, right? You play that correlation. And then maybe you also play, let's pretend you got Russell Wilson and Lockett and Kittle or whatever. Then maybe you try to find a receiver pairing from another game, right, that you like, and you correlate that way. Or you add a running back from a team that's favored. Maybe you play Le'Veon Bell with Denzel Mims in a game, in that particular lineup, something like that. You have to add more correlations into those 3-man game stacks. That's what I've seen all this year. When the 3-man game stack hits, it's got at least 1, if not 2 more additional correlations. You can scale that back a little bit if you go to the 4s.
Yeah, and to clarify that, not to keep going back and forth, but the 3-man stacks absolutely work. That's not what we're saying here. He's literally talking about San Francisco-Seattle game only. When you have the chalkiest situation, it's extremely unlikely today that a 3-man.
Don't play Jamal Williams in that lineup. You know
what I mean? That's what I'm saying. It's just if Jimmy Garoppolo has a big enough day to be in the winning Millie Maker 411,000 person tournament lineup, it's likely because he went off, and therefore more pieces would go off with him. So I love 3-man game stacks. I'm not really about them in this chalk game. I'll have at least 4, if not 5-mans, because it either happens or it doesn't. And if it happens, someone else is going to have you out leverage. That's why typically you don't see, a good cash lineup win these tournaments anymore, because even if your cash lineup had Russell Wilson to Lockett, you've covered a good angle. You've got Kendrick Bourne on the other side who actually gets there today. Like some are wondering if he will. Someone will still have more pieces in that game that go off. So you'll have a good lineup, maybe not a great one. So back to running back. We talked about the chalk here at the top. What else do you like here? Then let's move down to this next tier. There's a lot of other plays now, and because tier, of the over ownership really drops right as soon as we get down here. So what do you think?
The next tier is where this is how you make your Russell Wilson, Lockett, Kittle lineup. Is you drop to this next tier in running backs. So Gio Bernard is definitely getting overlooked. PPR capabilities to catch 7 to 10 passes, in my opinion, today. That adds up extremely fast on DraftKings. If he finds the end zone along with getting, let's say he gets 7 catches, he's on his way to winning a tournament. Dalvin Cook is the ultimate ownership plus high output expectation here. There's going to be basically no restrictions on him. He was, pun intended, cooking before he got injured. I'm expecting him to basically just go back and be a complete workhorse in this game with the weather. I like him as a swerve off of Henry or Kamara. I think that makes a lot of sense. You can do some weird things if you want to play a 4K running back. You've got this late game that's going to be high scoring in San Francisco and Seattle. You've got some injury concerns on the Seattle side with Chris Carson and Travis Homer. If those guys end up sitting, you have DJ Dallas, who's going to be close to an every down running back. They're probably not going to use him too much. The pass protection, he got blown up and missed assignments and pretty much cost them the game at the end of that Arizona game with his missed assignments. But he could be out there. The thing is, you also have Tevin Coleman back for San Francisco, who's the same 4K price. What you can do is you can just throw one of them in or both of them into lineups. You can use the late swap feature either on DraftKings or the stuff we have set up here on Lineup HQ. And if Chris Carson ends up in, you just go right to Tevin Coleman at the 4K price range. And I don't think Tevin Coleman's a horrible play. They gave him a big workload. It's either going to be him or Hasty. I don't know. San Francisco likes to run the ball. They're probably going to have a guy that gets a touchdown on the ground. It could be Tevin Coleman at 4K. If he catches a pass or two, gets 50 yards and a touchdown at 4K and low ownership, I think that's pretty interesting too. So you can set that up, and I like it. I normally wouldn't do it, but you have 2 4K options in that game that could be viable, and it's really easy to sort of swap around that either on whatever site or using Rotogrinders.
I love that call. And it's this week, of course, at this week where we've already talked how unique this one is with weather and whatnot. This is a week where that's also the highest game stack. So usually you'd have this opportunity when you're late swapping it to think, okay, there kind of is a more optimal decision here. You can look at what you're up against, but there's just going to be so many game stacks behind you and in front of you that you're not going to know, that you literally will have to flip a coin and make that choice on whoever you feel best about. Or if, to Britt's point, we do get more information, then just plug it in based off of that. So I do like that call.
I got one more at running back I want to know.
Yeah,
I wish he was getting more work and the Rams didn't mess around with touches so much in the backfield. Yeah. But it's pretty much a 2-man backfield in Los Angeles. Cam Akers has basically been relegated to an emergency role right now. Darrell Henderson looks legit. Miami is horrific stopping the run. It sets up good for him. I think he probably gets 15 to 20 touches, probably closer to 15 than 20. But I think he's really interesting. I wish he was just a little bit cheaper. I wish he was getting a little more touches. But if he's 5% owned, you generally don't want to go for the 5% owned running back too often. But he's the one guy I might be interested in.
I don't hate that. And I did like the other ones that you mentioned there. I'd already mentioned Jonathan Taylor, and we'll move to wide receiver in a second. But one more just for me is Myles Gaskin. I don't think there's been enough talk really about just, some of his numbers, what they look like, but also the Tua conversation, right? It's a brand new, it's his first start. He's getting in there. Love it. Can't wait to watch him play. I'm excited about this, but a couple things are this. One, Myles Gaskin, the low ownership, getting a lot of work, still a pretty fair price at 5.2K. And then the other thing is the Miami defense has been good. They've been putting up a lot of sacks, correlates well for a secondary correlation with something like that. And the one thing that Jared Goff is just horrible against is any type of pressure. And Miami does just that. So I actually really like, for a cheap secondary correlation, is to have a little bit of Myles Gaskin in with the Miami defense. And we don't talk defense on this show really. So it's just unless it correlates with something. Did you have other thoughts there?
No, I think I like both of those. I like the Rams to win that game pretty handedly, which concerns me a little bit about Gaskin.
Okay.
But listen, you're trying to win one of these large field tournaments. You can as Blender would say, do whatever you want sometimes.
Play whatever you want, yeah. And then lastly, just one thing on the Henry conversation. I think it goes with that, just talking about defense correlations. If you want to really double down, a way to get different when you're already using something, someone as chalky as Henry, is to do something different with the chalk. And it'll be a good segue when we talk about Keenan Allen in a second. But Henry, you could plug in with the Tennessee defense and you'd be doubling down because, one, since he's got no O-line, a fourth guy now out.
They're without any starter to start the season on the O-line.
Yeah. And they got that. And then two, a lot of people are using Burrow. So you're going against it twice, right? You're already getting off some chalk Henry by having Henry with the D. And then you're also going up against a guy that's pretty popular at quarterback, or somewhat popular with his pieces. So
that's just a little way to get different, right? Everyone's using Henry. That's how you make your lineup a little different and a little bit more correlated. I do like the Tennessee defense quite a bit today.
Yeah, and Jet Cards mentioned that in the chat earlier. He said, all this information is great, but at the end of the day, the Millionaire lineup is always a lineup that makes complete sense, but just goes against the lines a little bit. And that's just like you said, that would still make sense. It just goes against it a little bit because a lot of people still like Burrow this week, and you'd be doubling down on a chalk piece by filling it in with his defense. So I don't hate that. And now we got to talk about it for wide receiver, right? Now you've got Keenan Allen here. Like you said, the price, I have no clue where they come up with these things. What are you going to do with Allen, and how do you get different with him, or do you just get different elsewhere in your lineup? Because looks pretty obvious at 6.2K, and the ownership shows it.
So basically in the history of DFS before this year, the average top 3 highest owned wide receiver busted over 2/3 of the time, right? So two out of every 3 high owned of the 3 highest owned wide receivers didn't produce anything that could even remotely get you to a winning lineup in tournaments. it is completely flipped upside down this year, where now 2 out of every 3 are hitting, right? It's a humongous gap, basically a 50% increase in our ability to hit the highest owned wide receivers. I think a lot of that goes is the quarterbacks tied to them are generally good and they're playing well, and teams are scoring more points and they're good plays and in good spots. And I don't know if that's always going to continue, but I mean, it's pretty tough to ignore what Keenan Allen's doing on Hard Knocks. Justin Herbert's like, it's my job to get you the ball, Keenan Allen. And he's not lying. He's getting the ball to Keenan Allen. He's got 4 double-digit target games in each of his last games, right? And he was injured in the one. How do you fade double-digit targets? Now, some of those are the opposing team has been able to keep it a little closer. You know, there's been some weird things. And like every Chargers game, there's weird things where the Chargers give up points that they shouldn't, that keeps the game closer, or they lose.
Cost them, yeah.
I think Herbert's going to sort of lose that a little bit. A lot of that was Phillip Rivers and some weird things, but Herbert's looking pretty good. Keenan Allen's still good. I don't know how much longer, right? He's 28 going on 29, I think. Maybe he's got another year or two, but he's the true alpha. I like him. Just don't use him with your Russell Wilson, Tyler Lockett, Kendrick Bourne, right? I don't think I'd probably play any of the top. I don't know if Tyreek Hill is going to get up there in ownership as high as that. The cheap plays, right? Mims and Bourne, those guys are really going to be popular. I would maybe set out one of the rules is don't play anymore, right? Because it's all based off projections, whether you use the Blitz or you're just a Core 4 subscriber and you get those projections are usually pretty good too. I probably wouldn't play any more than like 2 of the top 6 owned wide receivers in the same lineup. It's just that. And the cheap receivers, everyone's going cheap with Mims and Bourne. You can get really weird. You can play like you can play Harris from New Orleans. You could play Mooney in that game, even with Allen Robinson back. You can play Demarcus Robinson from the Chiefs, right? You can play Marvin Jones, who's 4,200. There's a lot of ways to get off the cheap chalk. As good of a play I think Mims is. I'm playing Mims in cash. I got him in plenty of tournaments. But you need that cheap receiver this week to basically allow you to do what you want in the rest of your lineup. Don't just blindly throw Mims in with Tyler Lockett and Keenan Allen. You're just fighting too many lineups. Like literally, there's 400,000 people in the Millionaire Maker this week. I bet 10% would be 40,000, 1%. I bet 15,000 lineups have Allen, Lockett, and Mims together. Like it's just going to be ridiculous the amount of people that do that. And newsflash, it's really hard to beat 4,000 people when they all have the same 3 wide receivers.
Yeah, and that goes back to those groups, right? I think it's a great one to set up. We don't need to do it for the spirit of time, but if you want to take at least these top 4 probably, and Adams, Mims, Lockett, and Allen, go plug them in.
I would put Bourne in, and probably. It's tough because then you get into the Seattle stacks.
You can do separate groups too, guys. Like you can set up the group of 6. I'm not going to do them all, but you could set up the group of 6 that we just talked about. And then you could also do something like this at most 1 and double down and say, not only do I not want 2 of those in the same lineup, if these 2 are in the same 6-man group, I don't want these 2. I want it to pick between these cheaper punts or whatever you might want to do. There's a lot of ways you can go about it, but let's talk about how we can use some of these guys. You did mention Mike Williams earlier. I like that call. If you want to get a little bit different or get off the board from Keenan Allen. I've been talking about this all week. I personally like Metcalf over Lockett if I'm only taking one. Like I said, I like to stack that game up double stacked, but if you, for some reason, or if you're looking for a one-off or a smaller secondary stack, I like Metcalf to bounce back. So I think he has the bigger game than Lockett this week. That's just my opinion. But and then Mims, you've got, who else there? Braxton Berrios in the slot. I think that's an alternative option. Anybody else you're thinking about in that Jets spot that could take, because Mims, value wide receiver at 22%. It's a lot.
It's Mims. Berrios is the swerve. It's a couple hundred more if you want to do that. I think Mims probably leaves him on targets, but if you told me you knew exactly what was going to happen with the Jets offense today, I would tell you you're lying. So I think Berrios makes for an interesting swerve. I mentioned Harris in New Orleans, I think is pretty good. He's cheap. And there's just nobody else to really throw the ball to. I know there's some wind, but it's decreasing just a little bit. I want to note too, weather's such a big topic. Roth just tweeted out current measured winds. This is right now, 35 mile per hour sustained in Cleveland with 44 mile per hour gusts. Green Bay is 24 sustained with 44-mile-per-hour gusts. Buffalo is 13 sustained with 29 gusts, but he noted that's going to be increasing. Okay. Cincinnati's holding steady at 25 and 36. And Chicago's at 23 and 37, but Chicago will decrease as the day progresses here. So the wind, it's, we talk about it Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday morning. Do we know what the weathermen are they going to be correct? It looks to be holding true, right? So I would, if you've been taking wind into account, I would keep continuing to take it into account this week because it looks like it's going to hold true through kickoff.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that here in a second, actually, because we're getting to the next range. Couple questions came up quick here, Britt. DK Cash quarterback. I think for me, it's going to be Jimmy G. Do you have the same or different ideas?
There's two in contention, and it's the quarterbacks in that game. I currently have Jimmy Garoppolo. Yeah. You can swap off a George Kittle or a high price defense to, if you do a combo of that, you can get up to Russell Wilson. I mean, it's really tough to overlook Russell Wilson, but every quarterback gets there against Seattle. I like the cost savings. I mean, my lineup, I'm doing a lot of things I don't really do. I got a couple cheap wide receivers. I'm paying up at tight end. These are things I normally don't do in cash games, but it's just how it sort of lent itself in lineup construction this week.
Yeah, it falls into place quite nicely, actually. So, okay, good there. Keep going through these wide receivers some. We got about 15 minutes left or so. You guys keep throwing your questions in there. If we're not, I'm trying to relate them as I go, but I'll get to them throughout the end. We talked a little bit about Tyreek and Metcalf. Don't need to go there. Bourne as obviously another punt in that game you could use. I thought just looking when you said it there, Berrios going down, it's 2% versus 20. Yeah. 1/10 of the time, is he going to smash him in? Yes, he is. So for large fields, I like Berrios quite a bit more after seeing that. I thought he would at least have some ownership with him. That's not much at all.
Yeah, I'm not going to say I like Berrios. I don't really like Mims, but someone has to catch the ball eventually. The ones I want to stress are, it's sort of in the no man's land this week, is Deontay Johnson for sure is someone I absolutely love in tournaments. He's 5,500. He should be like a $65,000 to $7,000 receiver in my opinion. I mentioned the Seattle guy. Oh man, his last name's escaping me, but if you're looking for the ultimate like cheap swerve, don't play him in your Kamara lineup, but you could play Deontay Harris at 3,300. I think makes some sense. I heard DB talk about Traquan Smith. He's 4,700, probably a little bit too high. And then Marvin Jones is the other guy, along with Kenny Galladay. Kenny Galladay's too low owned at 10%. I would definitely look to Galladay in that mid-tier range at 6,600. A walking touchdown, unable to be covered. They just don't throw the ball enough. Maybe they have to today against Indianapolis. But Marvin Jones is 4,200, I believe. He's the other guy I'm pretty sort of high on, along with Mike Williams.
Yeah, I do like that. I guess the situation I want to talk about here, someone just made a conversation in the chat around, guys catching the ball 10 yards and that's that. But I think the bottom line is this: someone still has to catch the ball. So I want to talk about Cincinnati wide receivers for a second, because they're all getting a little bit of love here, right? There's AJ Green after some of his bounce back and all the air yards, quote unquote, that he's getting. And T Higgins has looked really good and been a target for Joe Burrow that's worked out quite nicely. And Tyler Boyd sitting there in that slot matchup, the guys have just been eaten up against Tennessee. Like, someone still has to catch these balls. And just because they're only, 7 to 10 yard passes, does the wind, force them to the ground? It's so strong that they can't run. Like, they still have to be able to move out here, right?
I really like the matchup for Tyler Boyd against Chris Jackson, right? I do the PFF show with Ian Hartitz. I'm over on PFF right now. It's basically about the nuttiest matchup of the week you can get in wide receiver versus cornerback. It's going to be Tyler Boyd. But AJ Green's too cheap for the amount of targets he's getting. His matchup is just fine. He's 4,500. AJ Green can just go. He can just get the ball. Right? He's not going to drop it. He's going to be able to get those back shoulder throws. I don't know if they're going to get to his back shoulder. They could go 10 feet over his head. But I like it. I think Gio is my preferred play. He is too low owned, in my opinion, in regards to what he can do. Especially, he's the cheapest of all the true workhorse running backs this week as well. I think Gio would be my preferred play. Boyd's matchup's good. He's expensive. And then I think I have no problem. If I saw AJ Green in a tournament lineup, I think you're doing just fine.
Yeah, mine is, as far as the namesake plays this week, Tyler's, I'm with Tyler Boyd over Tyler Lockett. That's just my opinion. It's too low of an ownership. I like Metcalf even more in that game. There's other options you can use with David Moore, with different guys, with Russell Wilson, that he likes to spread it around. And Tyler Boyd in that slot matchup, he's the type of guy. And I know in the chat you're talking about Waller. We're going to get to tight end. I was going to save it, but it's like these guys are yards after. A guy like Waller is a yards after catch monster. So even though Carr might throw him a 7-yard pass, he can absolutely shove off 3 guys and go for 50 yards to the house. It's not close. And if people are going to avoid that because of some wind, I love that. I'm going to avoid the guys that are typically catching 30-yard passes or have an 18-yard ADOT or something like that, because those just aren't going to be, like you said, is it going to get to his back shoulder to be catchable? I don't know. But it's like saying, would you avoid Kittle or Kelsey in a weather game? I would not, because they're going to catch the ball and it's going to be an easy catch. And then it's all about what their athleticism does for them after that catch and how far they can take it to the house. So
yeah, I want to note real quick for large field tournaments, when you have, I would say 3 to 4 of the really good tight ends, right? And I think we have that in Kittle, Waller, and Kelsey. The winning lineups generally have one of them. So I would really concentrate your exposure to the good tight ends. There's a lot of stuff going for Kelsey, giant home favorites is one of the strongest trends for tight ends. You could look at Kelsey there, but, and I think you can throw in Hunter Henry too. I think he's a really good tight end.
Yep. We can segue there. I mean, if you guys have wide receiver questions, throw them up in the chat. We talked a lot about it. The last thing I would just key in on wide receiver quick is that if you really want to leverage up some of that Tennessee Cincy stuff and get off of Henry or whatever you want to do, go with Tannehill. Throw him in with A.J. Brown. Maybe now we're talking about tight end, get some Jonnu Smith, and then have your Bernard on the other side, like you talked about, kind of too cheap. A bunch of those short pass throws. If the guys are getting at Burrow on that line, he could just be check down city and he could rack up the points for you. And that's just a different way to go about your lineup construction. What about tight end? I know you love Kittle here, Britt, but so talk to me about him and maybe, other plays, but yeah, he's 20%. That's fine.
Yeah. I'll take the over on that too. I just think that game's just the wind is holding true. I think that game's going to have more ownership than we're currently projecting. I just think so. I just mentioned, right, when there's multiple of the elite tight ends, I'm not on Andrews today, but with Kittle, Waller, and Kelsey, and I think they're all in reasonably good spots. When they're on the slate, you generally have to have one of those. I'm not really bargain hunting for a Harrison Bryant or a Noah Fant. I think the lowest I'd go is Hunter Henry. I consider him to be a really good tight end, but I'm not trying to go cheap at tight end today, which is again forcing in some of the cheaper wide receivers, I think, into a lot of people's builds. So I want to stress that. Henry, I'm on him. The Chargers tight ends caught 2 tight ends last week. And if you told me Hunter Henry didn't catch a touchdown, I probably would think you're lying. But Virgil Green, he's out. I think Henry's going to basically play close to every snap. Nothing about the matchup really stands out. Denver's defense is halfway decent. I just think Herbert's really good. I think Hunter Henry and Keenan Allen are his dudes. Henry does give you a little bit of leverage off of Keenan Allen. If Allen doesn't have a good game, I'm expecting Allen to have a great game. But if he doesn't, maybe it's Henry that catches a touchdown and he can get you there at the tight end position.
Yeah, what's the other guy? The XFL superstar, Parham, or whatever. Parham,
He all he does is catch touchdowns.
Yeah, if he does catch a ball, it's a touchdown. Circling back real quick, and then we'll keep going here. But they mentioned at wide receiver, probably a big thing to bring up was no OBJ. I know we're not really loving that passing game anyway, but with Hunt being so popular, what about, Rashard Higgins was always Baker's boy. What's your thoughts there at their wide receiver position if you were going there? I know we're not as high on it, but a lot of people are asking about that.
I wouldn't play Baker as my quarterback today, right? So that is really going to limit the amount of Cleveland wide receivers I have. We're currently, so I'm pulling it up on my screen. Higgins is 9%, Landry's 6%. Landry hasn't been healthy all year, and he's in that no man's land of 5,600. I think Higgins makes a little bit of sense. I would play Deontay Johnson 90 out of 100 times over Jarvis Landry for $100 less on DraftKings and currently projected lower owned. I don't understand all this stuff that leads into that, but Deontay Johnson in that under Brandon Ayuk, above Denzel Mims is basically my guy. There's just like this zero, a chasm of players you don't want to use. And there's no question Deontay Johnson is that guy for me this week.
Okay. And I like that. One quick note too, Higbee's active. So just in tight end here, some are asking about Gerald Everett. It definitely takes the shine off him some. I'm not there. There's just too many other options that you can go with. So I think that's a spot for sure. And then, there's some other guys in here down below. We talked a little bit about Jonnu Smith, Harrison Bryant being cheap. Someone asked about Josh Jacobs earlier. If you want to get different, if most are going Hunt and Waller, you could go Josh Jacobs and Bryant. If you want to get a little mini secondary stack in there, I kind of like it. It's a bit cheaper. You could see it happening, right? And then the tight end being, in the wind and all that sort of stuff. You're still getting a running back in the wind that gets a lot of carries, and you're getting a guy that should be short passes and see what he can do with them after the catch. So I wouldn't hate that.
I have 6 tight ends in my player pool. Outside of some random stack, it's Kittle, Waller, Kelsey, Henry. I've got Hawkinson, and I've got Jonnu. Outside of random stacks, I don't think you can convince me to play another quarterback today or tight end today.
Yeah. And the only other guy that really popped up for me was Irv Smith, right? In this game, they're going to have to pass a lot, come back $3,000. I don't mind something like that, but it's not something I'm excited about. It's just another guy down there if you want to have a cheap option. Put it this way, over Harrison Bryant, for me, I'll take Irv Smith just because I don't really like chasing the game that Bryant just had. And Njoku's still there. And Njoku actually caught a touchdown last game, and their snap share was still pretty split. So I do think that's something. And then the 2v2, yeah, we just talked about that. Irv Smith in a win game. Probably, yeah, nice. See, we're just talking about that. All right, this is it, Britt. We're going to do a couple things here to round it out. Guys, throw your questions up there if we got any more. But here's the thing. You almost can't fail on what I'm about to ask you because it's, if you've been watching the show, this is 100% for the guests the last, 3-4 weeks. You need to give us a hot take, but I'm telling you, it's like you can't be wrong. It started with Chief when he came on. He had, Amari Cooper's big game. There's been a couple others. So just got to give us a hot take for the week, something you think that's going to go down that get the people on.
Oh man, I mean, I mentioned Deontay Johnson is too cheap. If he gets 10 plus targets today, 5,500, you're going to be looking back. He's won tournaments 2 weeks this year. When people win tournaments, millionaire makers twice, they're not 5,500 when they're getting 10 targets. And he could outdo Keenan Allen when he's 10 times less owned today. So he's someone I'm really looking at. I'll stress again at the tight end position. You use the known quantities at tight end today. Don't go dumpster diving. You couldn't convince me to play Harrison Bryant this week. There's no way I would do that. I would play the known quantities, and I got no problem. It's really tough to get away from that Seattle San Francisco game. If you got 10 teams and you make all of them that stacks, generally I would tell you that's not great, but I actually think you can do that this week and get away with it.
I love the call. 3% owned. I think that's a great play. It's a way to get unique in that game. And like you said, Lamar, Hollywood, Deontay Johnson.
That game could score a lot of points.
Yes, and that's not chalk at all. These are guys that are barely owned. That's where I'm saying I definitely love that 3 men because they all have massive upside. They're all completely under-owned, and now you can just go fill in with whoever you want. Go back to Blender. There's lots of guys that you can put in after that because nobody has that 3-man stack for the most part in comparison to some of the other stuff. Said Harrison Bryant's going gangbusters now because we just both told you it's a garbage play. Yeah, add more funds. I'm guessing that's about right. But a couple more questions. We talked about our cash quarterback, Josh. We said, we like Jimmy G. I like this call here. Titans defense will be the number 1 defense on the slate. Could definitely see it. I think it's one of the things as, sports betting becomes more and more popular. You mentioned Tennessee getting on board that I don't even think the books adjust enough. They'll change a line by 2 points for a running back or this, but if a team's missing 4 O-linemen, it's almost like the line doesn't blink. And that's huge in a game. And when you're talking about Henry and that D together, I think that could be something where most will just have Henry, the defense paired up, could be that slight difference and just going offline a little bit. What about this? Jalen Rieger, that's for the night game. If you want to watch Chop and myself do the Sunday Night Premium show, we talk quite a bit about that. Any other defenses? I guess we do have a couple minutes here.
You
Britt,
can go crazy at defense. You can do whatever you want in defense this week with all the weather. We have the Saints currently projected as the highest owned. I don't know if that stands with the wind sort of.
Saints,
with
Packers,
the wind dying down a little
Bills.
in there, but the Bills. I don't know if I'd play the Bills. I don't know if there's a lot of. I know the weather's bad and Cam Newton can get weird, but this game's gonna have a lot of rushing attempts, if you ask me, which. You're basically going to be hoping for a fumble and maybe a fourth quarter pick six or something like that. I just don't know if there's going to be a lot of passing games. I like the Chiefs. I think are great. I think they're well worth 4,500. If you can get up to it, you got to sacrifice somewhere else, but that looks to be about as good of a spot as I think you can imagine. I wish the Eagles, if you're playing any of those Thursday through Monday contests, I love those. The Eagles D, or if you're playing on Yahoo, against Ben DiNucci, look like an absolute smash. I like the Rams.
Lots of options.
You can convince me to play the Vikings, right? It's a win game. Any game with weather, you can convince me to play either side.
Yeah, and one more for me just down here. I talked about the Dolphins. I talked about, I like your Chiefs call. They're expensive. Most people won't go to that, but they could just smash. But also, on the other side of that, the Jets at 2,000 is disgusting, but go look at your lineups when you use them at D and what you can fit. It's a way to get extremely unique within and fit almost everybody into your lineup. And it's not saying they're going to do a bunch. It's, when the 2K defense scores 6 to 8 points, that could be more than enough. And what if none of these other ones score more than 10 to 12? It's just a way to look at it. You could get even more points packed into your lineup. So I'll end on that disgusting call. Any more final thoughts before we get out of here, Britt?
No, I think we covered a lot today. I was happy to be on the show, and if you ever want me back, just let me know.
Yeah, and a big, mess up at the beginning. I'm the newbie. I was very appreciative to have you on the show with me. Like I said, I keep getting on with these guys that I followed for so long and all the stuff you do. If you guys aren't signed up to Rotogrinders yet, checking out Britt's Millie Maker Trends article, you got to get on here. Producer Devin will drop it in one more time. Hit the like button, subscribe. Thank you guys for all your support, and I'll be back here next Sunday with you. Thank you, and good luck.
Back in the Fantasy Bar, 6 of my favorite plays for Week 8 on FanDuel and DraftKings, including my favorite stud running back I'm expecting to be low owned, a stroll down narrative street this week, and what game am I stacking up? Belly up to the Fantasy Bar and find out. Welcome in, guys. Week 8 edition, Beers Daily Fantasy 6-pack, cruising right along here. Season about halfway over. Unbelievable, but good to be back here once again in the Fantasy Bar, providing 6 guys fresh off the tap for you on FanDuel and DraftKings. Before we take a look at Week 8, let's take a quick look back at Week 7. Not a bad week here. Had some nice hits. The Detroit-Atlanta game kind of went as we expected, got our points there, even if they were mistakenly scored by Todd Gurley. The production was there nonetheless. Watson was good outside of the Aaron Jones debacle and switching to Chris Carson, who got hurt. We saw Tyler Lockett go nuts. All in all, a pretty good Week 7, but we can be better. Let's do better here in Week 8. Looking forward to this slate here. No doubt. Looks like a fun slate of games. So let's start at the running back position. I promised you a stud I think is going to go overlooked here, and that's Dalvin Cook of the Vikings against Green Bay. So we got some guys in some good spots. We know Alvin Kamara going to have ownership anytime Michael Thomas is out of the lineup. Derrick Henry going to be heavily owned here on this slate. There's Kareem Hunt, another guy that should garner a ton of ownership. One guy who will not is Dalvin Cook, coming off the injury. I know people are going to kind of tread lightly. Let's wait and see what happens. But they did have a bye week last week. Sounds like he's 100% ready to go here. So I'm not going to be on the sidelines here with Dalvin Cook. I'm jumping in full steam ahead with this matchup against the Green Bay Packers. There is not a team in the NFL that's allowed more production to the running back position than the Packers have. It's my team. It's hard to say, but we put that aside. We put that fandom away, and we say this is a great matchup. Dalvin Cook, 2 touchdowns in that Week 1 game against this team. Not a team that tends to spread the running back touches out a ton. We know Madison will work in, but I don't think they ease Dalvin Cook back in here. So I think we get full bore, 100% workhorse Dalvin Cook here. FanDuel price will scare people away. There's cheaper guys people want to pay. Same thing over on DraftKings. He's the guy I think provides tremendous leverage off some of these other running backs in an amazing spot here against the Green Bay Packers. All right, let's go to tight end. Another guy I expect to go completely overlooked on the slate, Noah Fant of the Broncos. So we saw him come back from injury last week, did see 7 targets. The talk of the town, though, is his teammate at tight end, Albert O, who put up more production with the same 7 targets. So I think people are going to chase that. And I get it. Drew Lock, Albert O have that Missouri connection. He's cheaper, no doubt. But Noah Fant, we know, is a stud. Get the ball in his hands. This guy can make things happen. Now, let's take a look at the rest of this Denver pass catching core. We know Cortland Sutton out for the season. Tim Patrick really looking iffy to play here. That really leaves Jerry Jeudy, a cast of characters at the wide receiver position, and Noah Fant and Albert O. And this matchup pretty good. The Chargers not been good against the tight end. In fact, bottom 10 in allowing fantasy points per game to this position. So the targets were there last week. The production was not, but it's almost double the snaps that his teammate Albert O did. I'm not worried about Noah Fant here. I'm not worried about Big Albert passing him up in the pecking order. And without Tim Patrick potentially in that lineup, and even if he is in there, still interested in Noah Fant. Looks like sub 5% ownership in a good matchup here with the Los Angeles Chargers. All right, moving on. Our next pick. Let's take a stroll down Narrative Street. Love to have some fun here in the fantasy barn. We're going to do that. We're running back Le'Veon Bell of the Chiefs against his former employer and coach, Adam Gase. So this one definitely not for everybody, guys. I certainly understand that. And that's the beauty of the 6-pack. You don't have to use everybody. In fact, you don't have to use anybody if they don't match up with your research. I'm just telling you who I like, and I'm going to have some fun here with Le'Veon Bell, but it's not just the Narrative Street here. We also have some substance to go along with it. But let's stroll on Narrative Street here for a minute. Now, we know the Jets and Le'Veon Bell was not a pairing that either seemed to really like. It never seemed like the Jets or Adam Gase really ever wanted this guy around. Never seemed like Bell even wanted to be there or gave his all. So now he goes to Kansas City. We saw him in his first game action with Clyde Edwards-Helaire work in, get a good amount of touches, had 6 carries. Clyde Edwards-Helaire only had 8 in that game, so he will be a part of this backfield. But let's step aside from Narrative Street here and let's just look at the numbers here. The Kansas City Chiefs are 20-point favorites in this game at home, 19.5, whatever you may get it at. That is one of the biggest spreads that we're going to see all season long. In fact, that's probably the biggest spread that we'll see. So what does that mean? A, it means they're going to have multiple opportunities to score the football. And you know Le'Veon Bell is begging for opportunity to score the football here, so they're going to have chances for both of these guys to be productive here. If they get off to a big lead, why would they grind Clyde Edwards-Helaire into the ground when we can give Le'Veon Bell the ball 10, 12, 15 times here in a good matchup with the New York Jets? So yes, it's Narrative Street. Yes, we joke around with that, but it's also a tremendous spot for a bunch of Kansas City Chiefs to go off in this matchup. Their projected team total is approaching 35 points. That's 5 touchdowns to go around, and I'm going to call the Le'Veon Bell touchdown here. The beer gut telling me he's going to score. The Jets, 5th most fantasy points allowed to the running back position. So you tie it all together. Not only do we get Narrative Street, not only do we get a great price here on Bell at 4,600, who can be effective in the passing game as well, we also get a good matchup and a massive home favorite. Having some fun here, but I do love Le'Veon Bell. I'm going to be a big part of my builds, especially on DraftKings at just 4,600. All right, let's stay in that price range, trying to save you guys some money. Let's go to the wide receiver position with AJ Green of the Bengals. So Green really has had a resurgence here. We know the air yards have been there all season long. We have watched his teammate T. Higgins arrive on the scene. We've seen Tyler Boyd be consistent like we know he's been over the last few seasons. But AJ Green, besides those air yards the first few weeks, not much to put in the stat sheet, but we're talking 12 targets per game over the last 2 weeks, a ton of receptions. And the thing that's been missing, the touchdowns. For the amount of receptions and yards that he has, the touchdowns are coming sooner rather than later. Now, let's look at that price on FanDuel. You got these guys all kind of priced together, but on DraftKings, we're talking about AJ Green $1,100 cheaper than T. Higgins, $2,100 cheaper than Tyler Boyd, which is absolutely ludicrous here. Give me the cheaper of the 3. All 3 guys certainly viable here. A stack is viable, but AJ Green at that price point to me stands out in all formats. And the Titans have really struggled against the wide receiver position, 6 most touchdowns allowed. And I think AJ Green does find the end zone this week. We talked about that touchdown regression coming. and the 4th most fantasy points allowed as well. I love this game, love this spot, and that price on AJ Green. Love him on FanDuel as well, under 6K. That 4,500 really standing out to me here this week against the Titans. All right, let's stay at wide receiver. Let's stay in that same game, and let's stay with AJ. We're going to go to AJ Brown of the Titans. So a little AJ pairing here, but Brown been phenomenal here. 21 DraftKings points or more in 3 straight games, has scored 4 touchdowns over those games. We look at some ownership, and Derrick Henry, you guys know I love me some Derrick Henry, was very good to us a couple weeks ago, but he's looking like one of the highest owned players on this slate, and with good reason. I will be playing some Derrick Henry here as well, no doubt, but the passing game really provides that leverage, but we've seen many a times where Derrick Henry's in a great spot, and it's the passing game that goes off. So both are in play, both are viable, don't get me wrong here, but I'm going to go with AJ Brown here this week. The Titans, huge projected team total. We talked about that massive 34-point team total for the Chiefs, not quite that high, but they are approaching 30 here. A good matchup with Cincinnati, fair prices across both sides.
Hey guys, what is up, and welcome to Crunch Time. It's NFL edition. It's the greatest of all the Crunch Times. Joined by a couple very smart NFL minds. We got Tuttle and we have Christy. What's up, guys?
Hey, glad to be here. It's going to be a very interesting day with all the weather stuff. Can't wait to hear your takes, Kevin, and lots of good games to go over.
I am so stoked about the weather. I cannot even tell you. Honestly, this is the most excited I've been for an NFL slate in forever. Someone just tweeted me a video of the winds in Cleveland, and it's like trying to blow you over strong winds. It's just incredible. So I'm super stoked to talk about that. We also have Tuttle. How are you, Tuttle?
You know, I'm happy for a slate where you basically tell us what to do.
Well, I don't know about all that. Here's my take, by the way, is play the dudes anyways, especially in GPPs. Play the guys. Maybe Devontae Adams gets like 3 slants that he takes to the house. Like, that can still happen even in terrible weather. So for GPPs, I just play the guys. Take the lower ownership, play the guys. But in cash, do not play the guys. Before we get to that, we got to talk about some props. Tuttle, I believe you have some because there are monkeys and they're fighting with knives. It's a monkey knife fight promo.
Yeah. What did I send Devin this morning? I sent him under on the Harrison Bryant. 3.5 receptions, I believe, was what is listed on Monkey Knife Fight. I have the and then the over on AJ Green as well at 55.5 yards. That one you might have to talk me off of though with the win there.
Where is it?
That's in Cincinnati.
That's a terrible play. Give me the under on Monkey Knife Fight. Give me the under on that one. Probably that number has come down since it opened, and if it hasn't, then you'd want the under. Any others? Sorry, I didn't mean to interject.
No, and then it's just those two. Over on AJ Green, and then under on the Harrison Bryant at 3.5 receptions.
Okay. I am going to run through some weather really quick. Also, my earbuds, I thought I was so fancy, they just made the dying noise. So if suddenly I can't hear you, when I'm done with weather, you guys just start talking in case I can't hear you. But look, this is by far the most impactful weather week I've ever seen, and I've been doing this for 6 or 7 years. So please do not sleep on the weather being a factor here today. If you don't know, the windiest games are going to be in Cleveland, number 1, in Green Bay, especially the first half, in Buffalo, and then in Cincinnati. Chicago is super windy now, but they play later in the afternoon, and it won't be quite as windy there. And when I say windy, I mean, I really think it's going to be difficult to execute deep throws. Like anything you throw on a line, if it's a slant or, you're gunning it 15 yards down the field, it's going to be fine. That's not going to be impacted by a strong wind. But anything you're lofting up, even if it's a fade to the corner of the end zone, anything you're putting up there is not going to land where you want it to land when there's 45-mile-per-hour wind gusts. So for cash, I am a full fade on the passing game for all of those spots. Not Chicago, because Chicago, the winds are coming down. But anywhere else, I just think you should do better. You should play smarter and don't, like, could it happen? Sure. But I just think it's too risky. We also do have some rain. You look in Buffalo right now, it is still raining. By kickoff, probably still some light rain. Shortly after kickoff, everything there will be clear. Devin, do we have radar going on here? Okay, excellent. In Cleveland right now, there is this batch of rain moving through. Also likely why the winds are really picking up in that video that I just saw. It does look like that's going to be still lingering by kickoff, but it's not a soaker by any means. It's not a washout. But add rain to 45-mile-per-hour wind gusts, that's a problem there in Cleveland. That of all the spots, I think Cleveland is the worst. The weather is truly, truly terrible. And then last but not least, yes, I know I've got all my baseball spots here still tagged, but we'll look in Baltimore really quick because there was some pretty heavy rain in Baltimore. It's really, really light stuff now, and the winds are light in Baltimore. So I think the passing game, if anything, it's going to be fine. If the field is a little wet from earlier rain, great. It's going to be even harder for the defense to keep up. So I'm not too concerned there. That is the rain and the wind thoughts. Christy, I would love your take on how you're dealing with this weather.
Yeah, so it's interesting. There's a couple of games that I really liked, and I really liked, like Cincinnati, Tennessee, some of those game stacks and such. And as the week has gone on, I think you're exactly right. I'm removing some of those plays maybe from my cash game pool, but they're definitely still tournament plays. So I still, like a lot of those games, of course, but this is probably the first week for me where it's maybe impacted it a little bit more. And I've taken some of those players, out of some of my main lineup contention.
I love it. Tuttle, any differences there? Or are you kind of doing the same? Because there are some people who just say straight up, weather doesn't matter. Roth is useless. Like, that is not an uncommon take. Where do you stand on this?
Yeah. I'm kind of with you guys. I mean, I typically let Vegas do the talking for me, and we have seen totals absolutely plummet in most of these spots.
Exactly.
Which is, a little scary. So I'm kind of with you guys. I think it's still trying to target these teams or games potentially in tournaments, or potentially just target the running attacks a little bit heavier. Like we have Kareem Hunt, who's an awesome play regardless, but now with the win there, and since the win there as well, he's a even stronger play in Cleveland. And kind of the same with actually Green Bay. I'm trying to figure out and trying to find ways to get Dalvin Cook into my lineup as kind of leverage off of Jamal Williams. And I think that's another game that we could just see both teams run the ball quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, I'm glad we're kind of all on the same page there with weather. If people have questions in the chat, you can ask me. We've got the YouTube chat going. We've got the premium chat going as well. We do have a ton of content to get to that is non-weather related. So, Christy, if you don't mind, start us off talking about some quarterbacks, and I'm going to take a second to change these out and go old school here. So, Christy, take it away. Oh, okay. Tuttle, take it away.
Do I get to take it away?
You're the only one left, Tuttle. Only you can save us.
Man, it's kind of an annoying week at the quarterback position because some of the guys that we were liking are in these win games. I thought I was going to like Joe Burrow quite a bit on DraftKings. He's in the win game. I thought I was going to like Derek Carr quite a bit. He's in the win game. So I think what's kind of happening a lot, and I think we'll see ownership concentrate on this, is that I think a lot of people are just going to basically end up on Jimmy G as the cheap option, as cash game options on both DraftKings and FanDuel. And then Russ Wilson is the expensive option. That's kind of where I think ownership's going to go, just because of the wind in all these games. And then that's basically the only high total game left on the board, is if you take away, some of these other win spots. So I think Jimmy G is going to be very, very popular in cash games. Russ Wilson, like I said, is going to be popular as well. I think you kind of want to avoid Jimmy G in tournaments is kind of my take. He's not really a high upside guy. And yes, the matchup is extremely good, obviously, against Seattle. It's not really how San Francisco attacks. They don't just drop back and try to let Jimmy G drop dimes on opposing defenses. So I like Jimmy G as a tournament fade, but I think he's a fine cash game play on both sides at his price tag.
Okay, great. I suppose we'll roll right into running backs here.
Yeah, no, I can touch on quarterbacks real quick for tournaments as well.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah.
So in my main lineup right now, and I'm still trying to toy around with it as we talk here. So if anybody has any takes in the chat, feel free to send them my way, because I don't have a whole lot of confidence here. But I mean, I'll be interested to see where Patrick Mahomes' ownership falls out. I think it would have been a little bit lower owned. Again, he's kind of in a game that wind isn't as big of a concern.
It's good. They have good weather, and it's Patrick Mahomes.
Right, and blowout is the huge concern, I think. And I think people in general overrate blowout a little bit. Like if they're going to score 40 points,
then somebody's going to 40 points.
They're going to score 40 points. That's a good thing. Yes, you might not get the fourth quarter out of them, but if they're scoring 40 points and Patrick Mahomes is involved in, 4 or 5 of those touchdowns, it's probably a good thing for him.
Yeah.
And I do like him a lot on DraftKings just because I think he's pretty easy to stack with Demarcus Robinson and Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce. I like the 2-man stacks with Robinson as that third guy thrown in there at an extremely cheap price tag on DraftKings. And you can also bring it back with other cheap guys as well on the other side with Denzel Mims, Braxton Berrios, that sort of thing. So I think Mahomes is going to – I'm trying to keep him in my main tournament lineup, but I'm trying to still work some things around. But yeah, I like him just because of the weather there. And then also just because there's pretty good ways to kind of stack that game without getting too expensive. And then you can still spend up at some of the running back positions as well.
Okay. Anyone else? Surely.
I mean, there has to be. Like Lamar Jackson, I think is more of a FanDuel play for me. I think that could be a sneaky game, but I think I don't have much exposure to it on DraftKings. On FanDuel, I like the pieces in that game. Their price is a lot better on FanDuel. So like Marquise Brown is only $5,900 and is an easy stack pairing with the Lamar Jackson there. And then you can also bring it back with like a Chase Claypool or a Deontay Johnson for extremely cheap on FanDuel as well. So I actually don't mind that Baltimore game. Like we think there's going to be a lot of defense played, but there's still room for some of these guys to put up big statistical games. So I like that game, but I like that game stacked again on FanDuel more so than on DraftKings, just because of how the pricing works. I know we have people asking about Justin Herbert. He's a guy that I wasn't on him a ton at the beginning of the week, but again, he's somebody that, he showed us he scored 40 DraftKings points last week. He's a guy that, again, we kind of have to take what we can get with these games that aren't, heavily involved with the wind. So I think he's a fine tournament option. I think Keenan Allen is going to be extremely heavily owned. So I think he's an easy pairing with Justin Herbert if you go that way. But if you want to go more tournament sided with your stacking, then I think you're going to do like a Hunter Henry type of thing. If you're trying to take a little bit more of a tournament approach to stacking Herbert in tournaments.
Okay. Excellent stuff, Tuttle. Let's go right into some running backs here.
Yeah. So running backs, I think.
Are you targeting the wind games for running backs? Is that the plan?
It kind of just naturally works that way. These guys are going to be strong plays regardless, and now they're in games that are in the win game. So Kareem Hunt, I think, is probably the top point per dollar option at the running back position on this slate. He's in a win game. Jamal Williams, I think, is one of the top point per dollar running back options on the slate. He's in a win game. Those two are the guys I think that you're focusing in on optimal lineups on both DraftKings and FanDuel. And then I think you're filling in from there. I think DraftKings, you can make the case for either Alvin Kamara or Derrick Henry as that third option is in cash game lineups on DraftKings and FanDuel as well. But Henry's kind of expensive on FanDuel. I guess they both kind of are. But usually I side with the guy that's going to catch passes with Alvin Kamara on DraftKings. And I think that's kind of the easy way out. But I do kind of like Henry this week, so I wouldn't fault anybody for going one of those two guys as their third option. And then the other third option, I think in cash games, is Giovanni Bernard. I think there are some offensive line concerns there, and there always have. There has been all season long, but they're extremely injured on the offensive line this week. It's not the ideal spot for him in terms of that, but he's cheap enough. If you take the angle that they're going to do a lot of short passing, he could just see an increase in targets too if you want to take that route. Which again makes him a specifically strong player, and especially strong play on DraftKings where he's gets that PPR.
Okay, excellent stuff. I do believe the wonderful and talented Christy is back as well. Christy, you got us?
Yeah, sorry about that. I had a computer outage just right before I'm ready to talk.
It's fun when they decide to shut down at the most inopportune
Yeah,
times. They're
no
just like,
kidding.
I'm going to restart now.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Not in the middle of
Yeah.
the show. Well, we are talking about running backs here, and we're looking for some GPP takes at the running back position. So are you sticking with, some of these more obvious plays that Tuttle said you kind of just get led to?
Yep, exactly. So I have a pretty tight pool for running backs for cash and for GPPs. And you've probably already mentioned, but I mean, obviously Jamal Williams, Gio Bernard, Kareem Hunt, Kamara, and Henry are probably the 5 that I'm looking at the most. I love Derrick Henry a lot. I wrote him up as a GPP play earlier this week, hoping that he comes in a little bit lower owned since Hunt is in such a great spot and Williams and Gio are lower price this week. So I really like Henry a lot. I like Kamara more so on DraftKings, just with the PPR. And then Jonathan Taylor, I'm sure you guys have mentioned him too. I do think he is in a good spot too. I'm not sure where his ownership will, kind of come in at for sure, but I do think he's a good spot. And then for GPP plays, I think Delvin Cook, I like to get him in a little bit with Jamal Williams and pair both of those guys together. I think, we mentioned before, I think the running game is going to be more crucial in that game because of the win factors. And so I like Delvin Cook quite a bit. And then Le'Veon Bell on DraftKings, I think, makes an interesting play at $4,600 in a revenge game going up against the Jets. I think he's an interesting play.
Okay. Any interest? Let's see. JG says, how much Melvin Gordon is too much Melvin Gordon?
For me, he's not really someone that I'm on this week just
So
because
the answer is any is too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been a different story if Lindsey was inactive, but
right.
Lindsey's ready to play. So,
okay, fair enough. Christy, let's talk about some wide receivers. We still have a lot to get through. So, what are the cash game options?
Yes.
And do you play a guy like Adams, who is he the most dominant receiver right now?
Yeah.
Minus the wind.
Yeah, so I'll say on Adams, earlier in the week, I was really struggling because he's so expensive, and to get all these guys in there that you like, I was having a hard time. Now I'm taking him out of cash consideration. Okay. So I'm not going to use him for cash. I think
he's made the decision for you, essentially.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly. So I don't think he's a cash game play. If I'll talk about FanDuel first, I will say Lockett, I think, is a great play. He just is still mispriced at $7,200. He didn't get the price increase after his big game last week, being a Sunday night game and all. I think Brandon Ayuk on FanDuel is a terrific play, gets you exposure to that Seattle-San Francisco game. Metcalf still in consideration. I think Tyler Boyd is a good cash game play. T. Higgins. And then going on to DraftKings, I think Keenan Allen is one of the best plays out there for receivers, especially for cash. Definitely someone you want to look at. I think on DraftKings, the builds are a little bit more challenging and you're going to need to save some money. So I think Kendrick Bourne pops up into some lineups. I think Mims for the Jets pops up into some lineups too, just kind of a roster construction. So those are some of the guys I look at. On the other side with GPPs and stuff, I think T.Y. Hilton is an interesting play. His price has really come down. He hasn't done much. But, if there's ever a spot to, take a shot in a tournament, I think he's an interesting play. Tyreek Hill and Justin Jefferson are a couple other GPP plays that I really like too, and I think are in consideration.
Okay. Tuttle, anything there at wide receiver that is different?
Yeah, not a whole lot that's different. AJ Green's price tag stands out to me on DraftKings, where he's $4,500. He seems to be starting to get his legs back a little bit. First few weeks of the season were absolutely terrible, but he looks like he's kind of getting those legs back together. He's been a lot more productive as of late. A guy I think is going to be extremely low owned. I like his price tag on FanDuel a lot better. Allen Robinson, I think, is going to see double-digit targets. He's in line for double-digit targets whenever he takes the field. He was cleared late this week with concussion protocol. And I don't think very many people are going to have him just because he's kind of hasn't been on the radar all week. People have been assuming he's going to be out. I think he's actually a really, really strong play this week. So I do like Allen Robinson quite a bit. Again, I like him more on FanDuel. He fits the lineup construction a little bit better there. But I think you could play him in tournaments in both spots. And he's going to be, you see there, we have him like 2% owned. So he's a guy that I think could break the slate at very, very low ownership. Robert Woods is another tournament option that I like. We have him projected for 2% ownership as well. I think that's a decent game to target him in. And I also think he can get some work as a rusher. And it's a pretty good spot for him. You can never bank on that, but he does have some added upside there with his legs. And I wouldn't be surprised if he scored a touchdown on the ground.
Okay. Quick note on Allen Robinson. That's Bears, right?
Yep.
Yeah. For whatever reason, and I think it's because maybe earlier in the week, the forecast looked pretty ugly in Chicago, but it's really not going to be bad in Chicago. Like, things look a lot better in Chicago as of today than they looked 2 days ago. I don't know if a lot of people realize that, and I do think it's a spot that might kind of get grouped into the bad weather games, even though it's really nowhere near some of these other spots. So just a note, I do think that might come in a little lower owned than it probably should, because people think it's bad weather. Okay, let's get to tight end. Tuttle, what do you got for us?
Yeah, tight end, do what you can to get George Kittle in. I think is pretty much what you want to do. Yes, Seattle has been not too bad at defending the tight end position this year, but they do run a zone defense. I think it's around 80% of the time. Kittle is just, I think, far and away the best tight end option on this slate. So I like him quite a bit on both sides. He's a little bit difficult to get in on DraftKings. I think you have to go pretty cheap at wide receiver with like a Denzel Mims, who we talked about, in order to get him in. But I think I'm okay with that. But yeah, I think this is a position that you want to pay up this week. Typically, we've been kind of saving, but I wouldn't be surprised if Kittle put up a 30-point performance in this spot. So I really do like him, and I do want to do what I can to get him into my lineups. If you can't get him in, I do think Jonnu Smith is kind of the preferred option on DraftKings at 4,100. I do prefer him over Harrison Bryant, who we talked about a little bit, who's about $1,000 cheaper. I do prefer him over Hunter Henry's, who is kind of in that same price range. So I think for me, if I can't get Kittle in, it's probably Jonnu Smith. But I'm doing what I can to get Kittle in.
Okay. Christy, I guess Kittle, is that the obvious cash game play for you?
It really is. I couldn't agree with his assessment more, really, on all the tight ends. It's definitely a pay up spot for me. And I think with Garoppolo being cheaper at quarterback and such, it's easier to get Kittle in, especially on FanDuel and such. So I do like that. I like Waller a little bit too, and Kelsey, of course, at the top. For GPP side, a couple guys that, I'm also interested. Jimmy Graham, I think, is a little bit interesting, especially in some of those lineups, maybe that you have Kamara in there. He's going up against his old team. I think, he's definitely been getting some targets in the red zone. So I think he makes some sense. Hunter Henry, I think, is an okay play too. But I think, DraftKings, like you mentioned, I think Jonnu Smith is a good play if you're going cheap, and otherwise, looking to get Kittle or even Kelsey in.
Okay. And this is tournaments too. There's no off the board plays for you there. Those are the moves.
Tournaments, I would say, Jimmy Graham, and then maybe even Noah Fant a little bit too. A couple of those guys are some guys I'm considering for GPP lineups, but that's pretty much it for me.
Okay. Let's talk defense, because last week I kind of just thought you picked a defense and then everybody hoped they'd score a touchdown, but everybody played, was it Washington defense? And everybody won. I think it was last week when Washington played the Cowboys. And I didn't. I played someone crappy and got like -3 fantasy points. So is there a defense that is just the right play this week? Christy?
Well, I tell you what, so what I'm looking at, like on FanDuel, I'll start with FanDuel. I think there's a bunch of ways you can go, but the Saints, I think, are going to be the most popular on FanDuel. They're priced at $3,600. And, especially if you're pairing it with Kamara. The Chiefs, I think, are, a fantastic play. They're obviously the most expensive, but I think they're a great play. A couple others that I'm looking at, I think the Rams, they're kind of interesting. I like the Rams, Packers, Lions, and Chargers, maybe on the FanDuel side. On DraftKings, I think if you're looking to save some money, I know Miami's $2,400. I think that is a pretty good play. I think the Bears defense is actually pretty good. I think it's $2,800 or so on DK. And then the Titans too. I think obviously have a lot of interest in Derrick Henry. I like pairing, the Titans and Titans D and Derrick Henry together there as well. And then of course Chiefs if you're paying up. But those are kind of some of the plays I'm looking at defense.
Donnie in the chat pointing out Tennessee is the right answer. He says Cincinnati missing 4 offensive linemen.
Yes, they are. Yep, that's a very good point. Yep, they are. So yep, Titans look very good.
Tuttle, you got a favorite defense here?
She mentioned them all. Bears, I think Bears on FanDuel, and then Browns or Bears on DraftKings.
I feel like Browns is you get the shitty weather to go along with.
Yeah.
Right? That just seems,
Those are and again, those are like the saving options. If you want to spend up, you can do some other things, but those are the cheap options.
Gotcha. Okay. We've got 5-6 minutes left. Real quick, favorite stack, Tuttle.
I guess I'm gonna go with Chiefs passing attack.
Okay, Christy, favorite stack.
It's hard to get away from the Seattle San Fran game. I just think there's going to be a lot of points there. There's a lot of different ways to go. And I also like some components too of, Tennessee Cincinnati game, even though there's some strong win factors there.
But you like rushing and defense, is that, or is
that's
there
exactly
passing?
right. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Okay. I think we get into some QQs. So let's dive into it. I will start with a couple questions in Discord, also looking at the YouTube there. We'll go to Fit Crooks. He says, DK Cash, DK Metcalf and Harrison Bryant, or AJ Green and Kittle? Tuttle?
I'm AJ Green, Kittle there.
All right. Gophers fan says, Christy, who do you project for more targets? Wow, some guy I can't pronounce. Okwibunum or Mims/Burn?
Okuibunum.
Wow, good job, Tuttle. That guy or Mims/Born?
For more targets, I'd probably say Bourne, actually, just because they're so depleted.
Okay, great. JRC says, FanDuel Cash, Wilson, Hollywood, and Gaskin, or Jimmy, Metcalf, and Geo? Tuttle?
First one.
All right. Christy G-Man says, FanDuel Cash, Jimmy G, Lockett, and Kittle, or Wilson, Ayuk, and Waller?
I'd say the first one, but I think they're both pretty good.
All right. Mike Zimmerman says, DK Cash, Kittle and Miami D, or Kelsey and the Packers D?
Never make a decision based on defense.
But so you need Kittle, right? Isn't that what you said at the start of the show? You need Kittle.
Yeah.
All right. Tyler Madison says, FanDuel Cash, Mims and Jonnu Smith, or Brandon Ayuk and Hunter Bryant?
What was the first one again?
It was Mims and Jonnu Smith.
I would say the second one, actually.
Corey says, Tuttle, I need your favorite wide receiver play in GPPs, please.
I think it's Tyreek.
Okay.
Good one.
Great. David Lynch says, any concerns about Kittle and DK Cash if Jamal Adams plays? You don't care. We don't care.
No,
we don't care. Andrew says, hey, did you say Chicago D on FanDuel, Christy?
I think that is a good play, and on DraftKings too.
All right. Aaron says, DK Cash, Kamara or Henry? Tuttle, I know, Christy, you're Team Henry here, right? Or
I like them both, but I would lean Henry, but I like them both a lot this week.
Tuttle, you got to lean?
I think I lean Henry too personally, but I think like conventional wisdom is take the pass catcher on DraftKings, but I do slightly lean Henry too. So
okay. Days of No says, isn't Cleveland favorable wind with the direction it's blowing? I think it's when it's that strong, it's just going to be swirling around the stadium. I don't think we can assume that it's just going to blow with the stadium. So I don't think it's going to matter all that much. Let's see. David says, are both AJ Brown and Green safe in cash?
That's a Roth question.
Where are they playing?
That's Cincinnati.
Yep, Cincinnati, Tennessee.
I legitimately would not play those guys in cash. I just don't think you should play passing options in cash in any of the peak wind games. It just seems like surely there's another player somewhere that is priced at this, because they set these prices, they don't account for a 35 mile per hour wind. Mm-hmm. So it just doesn't seem smart to me. Is he viable? Sure, it's still viable. Could it happen? Yes. Would I recommend it? No, I would not. Achilles, FanDuel Cash, Hollywood Brown or T. Higgy?
I think Higgins for cash, Brown for tournaments, and we didn't really mention him, but I think Hollywood Brown is a really good play today.
Gophers fan, DKGPP, should I pivot off Mims with Jeff Smith?
I would not know.
Okay. S. Berger, DKGPP, John Taylor or Jamal?
Jamal.
We got a little 3v3 from ECS. You ready for this, Tuttle? It's Derrick Henry, Jonnu, and the Titans, or Kamara, Hunter Henry and the Browns.
I'll go number 1. Titans onslaught, I guess.
All right. I think we got maybe a little less than a minute left. Let's see. Andrew Martinez says FanDuel GPP. What do you think about Lamar Jackson with Brown running it back with Johnson?
Yeah, I think that's a good GPP play. I mean, I think it's going to be he's going to be very lower owned, and there's a lot of upside there.
I like it. Chuck Diesel says DK GPP with the New England wide receiver injuries and the win concerns in Buffalo. Does James White have any interest as a long shot tournament option?
If you're doing it, do it on DraftKings for the PPR.
Exactly.
Okay, very nice. Adam Frick says get Mims and Bourne to fit Henry. DK Cash. Mims and Bourne okay to fit Henry?
You know, I think you probably could. I think on DK, you're going to need a couple of cheap wide receivers in cash, most likely this week.
Okay. D Gold, Landry or AJ Green, FanDuel Cash?
Yeah, that's tough. I'll take AJ.
Okay, there you go. That is the final question. Guys, if you like the show, and a bunch of people on the YouTube chat said, thanks to Roth, Tuttle, and Christy, always great. Hey, great show. Someone actually complimented Devin. It's a great show, Devin. He was fine, I thought. But hey, if you like the content, it's easy. All you got to do is sign up for Rotogrinders Premium. We have a deal going on right now, so you get some money off, and we do content like this every day. And most of it is behind the paywall, and there are just a host of really, really, really sharp, DFS analysts that can help you out. So go ahead, sign up for that. Devin will likely put the chat in unless I made him upset, in which case he will not. Oh, there he is. Yeah, he's on it. Don't forget to smash the like button. That's important on the YouTube. Guys, I am so excited. Normally we'd hang out for who wouldn't? Normally we leave. I just cannot wait to watch this mayhem. If either of you notice a play that was just obviously comically impacted by wind, please send me on Twitter. Be like, Roth, you should see this play. Can you do that, Christy? Tuttle, can you do that?
Absolutely.
That.
We're on it.
Okay. Anybody at home, if you see a play that is comically, oh my God, look at the wind, please tag me on Twitter so I can retweet it. All right. That's it. That's all I got. Eric says, how long until your first negative mention on Twitter, Roth? 30 seconds. 30 seconds. People are going to be saying they were wrong to listen to weather. Guys, we appreciate you. We love you. Thank you for hanging out with us. We're going to catch you next week. You have been crunched.